Story 1. Parents abandoned me as a child because I wasn't as smart as my twin, but when they tried to reconnect years later, I introduced them to my new family, and it didn't go well. So, 10 years ago, when I was 12 years old, I was sent to live with my uncle, my dad's older brother, in the countryside by my parents because they did not feel like taking care of me anymore. They thought that I was a burden on them, and they would much rather just have my twin to raise, whom they believed was far more capable than I was. And I don't deny it. She really was a lot more clever than me, and unfortunately, I could not keep up. I was mostly just average, but in a family of overachievers, average just doesn't cut it. My parents were both doctors, and they had decided that my sister and I were also going to become doctors just like them. But if I'm being honest, I never really had any interest in academics, and I was more inclined towards more creative endeavors, and that's what I really wanted to do with my life. They used to put me under tremendous pressure, and I was not doing well at school. It did not help that my parents were not even trying to encourage me to do better. They were just insulting me and constantly comparing me with my twin sister. I was used to that sort of treatment from a very young age, but with time it just kept getting worse, and I found it really difficult to concentrate on anything. By the time I was 12 and had hit middle school, I was doing so bad at everything that I was flunking out of most classes, and even though I was trying my best, I was unable to score better. My teachers constantly complained about me because they did not know how things were at home for me. They just believed that I was lazy and was not willing to try hard enough to do better. And even people at school kept comparing me to my brilliant twin sister, who was doing so much better than I was. I was literally crying myself to sleep every night because every single day my parents would make it a point to remind my sister how much they loved her and remind me how much of a disappointment I was being to them and that I needed to do better. One night, things got so bad because at dinner they insulted me about my grades once again. I lashed out at them, and they grounded me for the next 2 weeks, so I decided to run away from home, not even knowing where I was going to go. Obviously, I couldn't get very far, and I could only make my way to the park nearby, where I sat by myself, all lonely and terrified in the dark. They found me there at around 5 o'clock in the morning. They had to call the cops and find me, after they had brought me back home, and that was the day that they decided that they were going to ship me off to my uncle's house in the countryside where I could grow up with him and his family. When I was told by my parents that they were sending me to live with my uncle and his family, I literally begged them so many times not to do that to me, that I would be better, and I would not disappoint them ever again or try to run away, but they did not care about any of that. They told me that I had let them down and that they couldn't deal with this anymore. They had another child to take care of, and they couldn't spend all their time taking care of somebody who had proven to be useless time and again. I don't even think that was true. They spent most of their time fawning over my sister. They barely even cared about me unless it was time to make fun of me for how bad I was doing at school. Anyway, I kept begging them not to do that to me because I did not want to be away from them, and most importantly, I did not want to be separated from my sister since she was literally the only person who was nice to me in that family. However, they did not listen to me and did what they had to. They made me say goodbye to my sister and then didn't even allow her to be there for me on the ride to my uncle's house. Once I was there, I literally could not stop crying for the next few weeks, and I just wanted to go home. I kept trying to call my parents, and my uncle and aunt were really helpful and supportive during that time because they could understand what I was going through. But my parents did not pick up any of my calls and ignored me. A few weeks later, I decided to accept my fate and just make peace with it. I did stay in touch with my sister. She was the only person who would speak to me, but it had to be done in secret because she did not have a cell phone. So I had to call her from my uncle's phone on the home phone whenever my parents were away. Social media was just getting popular at the time, thankfully, so she would use the computer to talk to me, and occasionally, whenever she would tell me that the coast was clear, I would call her, and then we would finally get to talk to each other. My sister and I are still in touch. We love each other, and that's how it's always going to be. She has kept me updated on what has been going on with her and our parents for the past 10 years, and has also told me that our parents were planning on reaching out to me a couple of weeks ago, which is how I was able to prepare myself for that mentally. For the past 10 years, I had absolutely no contact with my parents. Initially, it was because they had refused to get in touch with me or even speak to me after they had dropped me off at my uncle's house, and after I had spent a couple of years at my uncle's place, I was the one who was just not interested in reaching out to them ever again. They had abandoned me. That was the end of the story. Honestly, after I moved in with my uncle and aunt, I was having a much better life. They did not put me under the kind of pressure that my parents had, and I started doing better at school. I was still average academically. I was not the straight-A student that my sister had always been, but at least I was not flunking out of all my classes. My uncle and aunt also allowed me to take part in other activities like school plays and sports, which my parents did not allow me to do because they thought that it would affect my grades badly. I was living my life to the fullest, and I was very happy with them. When I was living with my parents, I was also forbidden from talking to boys because they thought it would distract me. My uncle and aunt, however, did not have any such ridiculous restrictions and allowed me to talk to whoever I wanted, and I was allowed to bring friends home as well. Coincidentally, that was the reason why I was able to meet my husband, who has been there for me all along. We have been together for the past 7 years. We got together in high school and have been inseparable since then and even attended the same college. I graduated from college last year, and 1 week after we had graduated together, we got married in an intimate ceremony, and last month, I gave birth to our son. I don't live with my uncle and aunt anymore. My husband and I have a house a few streets away from them, but we do visit them quite frequently, and so do they, to see our son. I'm on maternity leave right now, so I don't have to go back to work for another few weeks. My sister has openly been in touch with me for the past few years because after she turned 18, she decided that she did not feel the need to hide our bond from our parents because there was nothing they could do. She was the maid of honor at my wedding and is the godmother to my child as well. Last week, while she was visiting us, she told me that our parents planned on paying me a visit. They still did not know that I was married and had a baby because everybody had pretty much stopped speaking to them after they had abandoned me because it was such a heartless thing to do. So they hadn't known anything about my life, and my sister didn't think that it was necessary for her to talk to them about me, so she did not tell them anything even when they had asked. But after 10 years, they were finally feeling some sort of regret about what they had done all those years ago and were planning on reaching out to me, so she thought that it was her duty to tell me about it so I could decide what I wanted to do, and it would not come as a shock to me when they contacted me asking if they could visit me. A couple of days after her visit, my parents indeed reached out to me through social media asking me if they could visit me. They did not apologize for anything. It was just a plain message with just the two of them asking if they could visit, nothing else. I was a little let down by that message because I had genuinely expected them to at least say that they were sorry for the way that they had treated me in the past. For a little while, I was so pissed that I thought about not responding to that message at all, but then I had a better idea, and I thought that I would invite them over and show them that place because now I had a great life, and I thought that it would be an appropriate idea to let them know how great I was doing without them. I gave them my address and invited them over for dinner on the weekend. I also invited my uncle, aunt, and my sister, and obviously my husband and my son were going to be there because that dinner was being hosted at my house. I did not tell my uncle and aunt that my parents were going to be there, so everybody was very surprised to see each other when they showed up at my house last weekend. This was 3 days ago, and I still don't know if I did the right thing or not. Anyway, once everybody was here, things were pretty awkward because obviously, I had not seen my parents in 10 years, and everybody in the family had cut them off, and that included my uncle and my aunt since they did not want anything to do with my parents either. The reason behind it was that my parents had promised that not only would they support me financially for as long as I was living with my uncle, but they would also keep in touch so that I did not get lonely and make sure that my emotional needs were met as well, but they only lived up to half of that promise. They did send money every month, but they did not bother to keep in touch with me and were just glad to be rid of me. That's not the deal that my uncle had signed up for, and he was upset that my parents were abandoning me emotionally, but he did not mind taking care of me, so he was the one who had stood up for me and told the rest of the family what my dad was doing, and everybody else cut my father off for that reason, so that led to a lot of bad blood between the two, but my dad still continued to send money until I turned 18. After that, there was no contact between them either. After greeting each other, we were supposed to have dinner together, but I decided to make a toast before that. As if things were awkward enough, I decided to lean into it and make it even worse because I wanted my parents to feel sorry, and I wanted to make them feel bad, so I got up and started making a speech about how beautiful the last 10 years of my life had been compared to the first 12. I made it out to be a speech to my uncle and my aunt because honestly, they had done a lot for me over the past decade, and I don't think that I would have been able to make it this far in life without them. I also thanked my husband for being there with me all along the way and my sister for never giving up on me in spite of everything that was going on. Very pointedly, I decided to snub my parents in my speech because I did not have anything to thank them for, and they noticed that because throughout my speech they kept their eyes downcast and did not even say a word. Once I was done with my speech, I decided to rub it in even more and turned to my parents and told them that I was finally ready to introduce them to my new family. They were shocked at the very core when I announced that because I didn't think they had been expecting me to say something like that, and as soon as I said that this was my new family, my mother burst into tears and literally made a run for it in the first place, and all of us would have been much better without all this drama. After they had left, we had a very awkward and quiet dinner together, and nobody stayed for dessert, and I was glad for it because it was just really heavy. I did not like my parents, but I did not think that what I had done was right. I haven't had an opportunity to speak to my uncle and aunt yet, but my sister and my husband both think that I took things a little too far and that I shouldn't even have responded to my parents' messages if I did not want to interact with them, but insulting them like this was just unnecessary. I don't know if I did the right thing or not by inviting my parents over to dinner and then humiliating them. Update 1. Alright, so the comments so far have been pretty divisive about whether or not I should apologize to my parents, but everyone agrees that I should talk to my uncle and aunt at the very least. Since the jury's still out on my parents, I decided to contact my uncle today. It's been a week since the family dinner that I hosted, and we hadn't been able to talk much for the past couple of days because I was really busy, and so were they, and I also think that the awkwardness was still there, so we did not speak to each other because we do not want to make things uncomfortable. But today, I addressed it by calling my uncle up, and before he could say anything, I just told him that I was really sorry for inviting my parents to the dinner that day without even giving them a heads up about it. He told me that he was a little shocked that I had done that, but eventually he got over it. He just hadn't reached out to me because he didn't know if I was feeling fine after that night since I was pretty upset, and he agreed things had gotten pretty awkward that day, but he told me that it was all water under the bridge and it did not matter. Then I called my aunt and apologized to her as well, and she had a similar reaction. So now that I have apologized to both of them, and that's out of the way, I don't feel that guilty anymore. Personally, I don't feel like I owe my parents an apology because after everything that they put me through in my childhood, I really don't think anybody would feel sorry for behaving the way that I did. They haven't apologized to me yet, so I don't see a reason that I should. I spoke to my husband about it as well since he had said that I should apologize to them, and I explained to him that even though what I did at the dinner was uncalled for, the way that I had been treated in the past was also not acceptable. He seemed to understand where I was coming from, so he did not push it. I said the same thing to my sister as well, and she was kind of skeptical about it, but then she told me that at the end of the day it was my decision. I was the one who had been wronged, so whatever I decided to do, it was fair enough. She hasn't been able to get in touch with our parents either for the past week, since they have been suspiciously quiet, but I'm guessing they are just laying low for the time being. They will definitely reach out to me again and demand an apology or try to create some drama. Update 2. Hi. So I just wanted to get something out of the way. My sister is not trying to be diplomatic by having a good relationship with our parents, and even if she is, I am fine with that, so it does not need to become such a big thing in the comment section, which I've been noticing. She knows that what they did to me was very wrong, but she was also very young. It's not like she could have stood up for me and protested. She was against the idea at the time, but we were so little that our opinions didn't really matter, so she couldn't have done anything anyway. She did her best and kept in touch with me, so that's enough. Now, the reason that she is still in touch with our parents is because they're getting older, and she doesn't want to abandon them because that would make her feel guilty. There's nothing more to it than that. It's not really that deep, so please don't accuse her of anything. It's completely unnecessary, and we have a lot of love between each other, so we don't think that the comments being made about her are justified. Now coming to what happened, so as I had mentioned in my last update towards the very end, I was pretty sure that my parents were not going to sit back down and take what I had done kindly. They are just not the kind of people who let things go easily, so I'd been prepared for some sort of retaliation from their end, and it finally happened today, 10 days after the dinner that I had hosted. They decided to go public with the incident and actually posted all about it on social media. I thought that was pretty surprising because they don't really have a very active social media presence, but just for this one incident, they decided to post about it, and just as I had expected, it was a very one-sided post where they only spoke about how hurt they were, but they did not mention any of the things that they had done in the past. I honestly would not have cared about that post if it had been directed towards our family members, since nobody from my family likes my parents because of what they did in the past by abandoning me and stuff, but they had been very clever about the entire thing, and they had decided to go ahead and tag my coworkers and my husband's coworkers as well, even though he didn't even have anything to do with this entire fiasco. Obviously, my coworkers were not aware of my history with my parents and my strained relationship with them, so they were all pretty shocked when they got tagged in that post, and they started blowing up my phone almost immediately. I'm on maternity leave, so I obviously did not know what they had posted because I was not at work, and I don't really check my social media that often because I'm usually busy with my son. But after they started sending me messages telling me to check out what had happened online, I was shocked. I did not know how to react to that because I had not been expecting any of it. I was pretty sure that they had been able to find the account of my coworkers by stalking me online because I have quite a few pictures with them, and I had tagged them in it, so that's probably what they had been doing in the past week, stalking me trying to find out who I was friends with at work so they could ruin my reputation. Anyway, I saw that post. I was shocked for a couple of minutes, but then I decided to comment and tell people the reality of the situation. I did not have anything to hide. I was the victim in the situation, and what happened at the dinner was uncalled for but not unjustified. So I typed out the entire incident that had taken place, how they had dropped me off at my uncle's house all those years ago and then refused to keep in touch with me, and even when they had reached out to me, they had not apologized to me, and after they got to my place, they still hadn't apologized. If they had done that, I might have reconsidered saying the things that I did, but anyway, in my opinion, what I did was not wrong. I also clarified the same to my friends at work who had been tagged in the post. I apologized to them on my parents' behalf because they did not need or deserve to get caught up in our drama, and it was really ridiculous of my parents to do something like this. I'm obviously pretty pissed off because they could have just targeted me and kept things clean, but to drag my coworkers into this, that's just below the belt and unacceptable. I've been waiting for my husband to get home. I did not want to bother him at work with this today because he had told me that he had an important meeting with a client, otherwise I might have contacted him and told him about this, but honestly, this is just petty drama, and I can deal with this on my own. I have already spoken to my sister. She thinks that our parents are being crazy right now. They were probably just not able to take the disrespect and completely lost it, and I think that is exactly what has happened, but even then, nothing can ever justify this sort of behavior. I haven't even told my uncle or my aunt about this because I'm sure they're going to have very strong reactions to this, and I don't want to trouble them with this right now because they're pretty busy at work. Update 3. So a couple of hours have passed since I posted my last update. It's 8 o'clock in the evening right now, and everybody's at my house, my uncle and aunt and my sister. My husband has also come back home from work, and we are just trying to figure out a way to deal with this situation. I don't want to go to a lawyer like a lot of you suggested. I really don't have the time or energy to file a petition and then deal with that. It's just not necessary. I want to deal with it personally and keep lawyers out of this for as long as possible. Of course, if they refuse to take down that post, then I might have to get in touch with an attorney and file a defamation lawsuit or whatever they deem appropriate. But until then, we are going to try our best to have them take it down. So far, everybody has texted them and told them to take it down, but they haven't cared about any of that. They haven't even responded to our messages, so I don't know what they are thinking. They haven't bothered to delete my comment either, so at least everybody who sees the post will get to know the truth, and a significant amount of people have seen that post. It's getting a lot of traction for some reason, and that's not good for me because I don't come off looking too good in that post. It's not just my coworkers who had been tagged who saw that post, but a couple of my acquaintances have seen that as well and are asking me about it. I don't know how it popped up on their feed, probably because I had tagged in the post as well, but I have removed that tag, and it's still showing up on people's feeds. I figured that there must be some glitch with the app, but it's just not good for me. People are asking me about it, and I'm just getting sick of answering their questions since they can just read my comment and call it a day. But for some reason, they feel they need to reach out to me personally and ask me about it again and again. It's getting really annoying, and I just want this to blow over. Honestly, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that I don't have to be contacted by HR, because that might spell trouble for me, and I really don't want to ruin my reputation at work because of my parents. So as of now, my family and I are still trying to figure out a way to get them to take this down, but they are not responding to me. Tomorrow, my sister has told me that she is going to visit my parents and ask them to take it down in person, so that might work, and if they still refuse to do so, we will be left with no other option but to go after them with an attorney, and I'm really hoping that it doesn't have to come to that because it's going to be a lot of work for me, and right now I just want to spend time with my son. That's what my maternity leave is for anyway, not to deal with their stupid little shenanigans. Update 4. Hey, so my sister went to visit my parents today for an hour. I had no idea what was going on, but just half an hour ago, She told me that she had spoken to our parents and said that they were very upset, which is why they had made that post and tagged my coworkers, and my guess was correct. They had been able to find my coworkers and their social media accounts by stalking me online. That was pretty creepy of them, but whatever, that's literally the least of my concerns right now. Anyway, she told me that she had had a long discussion with them, and they told me that they would gladly take the post down, but for that, I had to apologize to them first. I instantly told my sister that it was going to be a no for me because I did not do anything wrong, and I'm going to stand by that, and thankfully, she knew that I was not going to apologize, so she had told my parents that no matter what, I was not going to pretend that I was sorry for something that I didn't even do wrong. They could just save their time and energy and take that post down because otherwise, I was planning to come after them with a lawyer, and that would not be too good for them. That discussion went on for almost 1 hour, and in the end, they decided that they were going to take that post down and end it, but they have also told my sister to tell me that they are cutting me out of their lives and the inheritance as well. I really don't care about any of that. I just want their post to be taken down. They can keep their inheritance to themselves. It holds no importance to me. My husband and I are doing pretty well career-wise, and we know that we are going to be rich, and even if we are not, I'm fine with that. At least I don't have to rely on them for money, and my sister told me that she told them the same thing, so at least they are aware of my feelings on this. Anyway, now that that is dealt with, I'm going to spend the rest of my time on maternity leave with my son and make the most of it before I have to go back to work. Thank you so much for all the support that you guys have shown me. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Caught my wife cheating twice in 5 years. I divorced her and now I'm happy with someone new, while she's stuck with her broke app in a house she can't afford. There is hope on the other side without your cheating partner. I've never posted my story in detail here, but I'm hoping that maybe someone comes across it and it gives them some hope that life goes on, as this sub has been invaluable to me. I caught my wife of 15 years cheating this past year. It was the second time she had cheated on me in 5 years. After the first time, we reconciled after she begged me to stay in the marriage and had a tosh-year honeymoon phase where it felt like we were totally in love once again. However, she went back into her pattern of leaving herself available to any guy that shows even the slightest interest in her. Her affair this year detailed her flying a man she was talking to on the internet to a conference she was attending in another state, which I found out about immediately. In the aftermath, she indicated that the affair was over and that she wanted me to stay with her. We have 2 children, but I was torn, as it had become clear this was a pattern, a cycle that could not be broken. In the month following that day, I attempted to talk to her about the affair and my frustration with the whole situation. She responded with only gaslighting and blame-shifting. Still, after a month, I told her that I agreed with her that we needed to save our marriage. She, however, responded this time with, "I can't make that decision with you right now." I spiraled. How could this woman who had cheated on me and then indicated she wanted to stay with me put me through this? Over the course of another month, I did my best to save our marriage, but she still didn't want to consider counseling or talk through our issues. It was one of the most depressive months of my entire life. I began talking with some friends and family about the situation, and their response was universally, "What on earth are you doing? Why are you trying to save a marriage that essentially has no hope?" As I spoke with them, I noticed a shift in myself, that I started to change from, "I only want this woman," to "You can find happiness without her." From "What about my kids?" to "Your kids will do better in an environment where you are happy than one with such an imbalance between the 2 parents. One night it shot through me like a lightning bolt. "You need to ask for a divorce." I walked into our bedroom where she was watching TV, and I said, "I want a divorce." She responded with, "Well, if that's what you want, I do want that." I was terrified I would regret my decision in the days following and come back to her on my knees pleading to save our marriage. But I didn't. Instead, what followed was actually a very amicable and agreeable split. Funny enough, our relationship near the end of our marriage was probably one of the best points in our marriage. I think it's because I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care how she felt about me as a partner. I wasn't going to let her determine my happiness anymore. In all, I kept the house because she couldn't afford it, but she found an apartment nearby. We agreed on literally everything in our divorce, so we were able to do a dissolution of our marriage, so we didn't have to do a knockdown drag-out fight over every little thing. We have 50-50 custody of our children. I'll give people going through this or possibly about to go through this some advice. If you can and you live in a state where you can do a dissolution versus a contested divorce, do it. Absolutely talk to an attorney, but there's a lot of advice on here to get down in the muck and do a knockdown drag-out. But if you can come to a satisfying agreement between the parties, you need to do it. That said, always keep an attorney in your back pocket. Don't be afraid if you feel like your partner is being unfair or there's an issue that you can't budge on, to use divorce to make sure you get what you want. But I can say don't let the emotions of the affair feel like you need to use divorce to get revenge when you can likely come out much better on the other side if the process is amicable. I have started dating again, and I've actually met a woman that I really, really like. She is also someone who divorced due to an affair against her about 6 years ago. But most of all, there's no C with her. She and I share love languages and can be open and honest without the C that fed my marriage for so long. We're taking it one day at a time together, but this is the best I felt about myself in a very, very long time. My kids have adjusted to the situation, and what I was terrified most about, that my kids would never adapt or feel resentful, are in fact thriving. Kids are way more adaptable than we give them credit for, but I'm just happy. I'm truly happy in a way I haven't felt. I make time for myself. I'm getting to travel more. I see my friends more often than I did when I was married. I get to make decisions for myself again. I've seen a counselor just to talk about this trauma in my life, and she has made me feel better that I wasn't crazy, that I experienced gaslighting for so long, that it's remarkable I could push through it. It may seem like you're in depths of despair in the aftermath of an affair. Believe me, I know it. It may even seem more depressing when you have to come to terms with your marriage ending. But happiness exists on the other side. But you have to let go. You have to take your life back, and once you make that decision, you have to put that part of you in a box, take inventory, and move on. Your ex-partner is now in a relationship with her old affair partner. Who cares? That's not your life anymore. Your ex-partner is broken, likely irreparably, and they aren't going to change, and you can't let their brokenness affect your happiness anymore. They can go be broken, but not on your watch and not in your emotions and your heart. Happiness is out there, and you may not find it immediately, but you can prune back the dead leaves and relieve yourself of the dead weight that's dragging you down, because happiness you might find in a broken relationship with a broken person is just dead weight and is likely temporary, and will always keep you from achieving fulfillment. Take care of yourself, friends. Hope and happiness are out there. Update 1. Sometimes I have to laugh at how they are all the same. It really is remarkable how similar the stories on here are, aren't they? I realize we all have our own experiences and our reactions to the experiences are different and valid, but it's incredible just how exhaustingly formulaic these people can be. This is especially true if the cheater focused early on via a texting relationship. The cheater finds someone that they swear they are just friends with, almost always of the opposite sex. The text threads are just always the same. One of them drops a touch of an innuendo here or there, just testing the waters, because heaven forbid you just effing converse with someone instead of having to check to see if maybe there's some mutual seal tension. After a while, the innuendo becomes a joke between them. Of course, a normal person in a committed relationship would have told the other person to F off, but we're not dealing with normal people here. Then the innuendo and joking turns to less joking and more actual digital flirting. Then oops, here's a picture of me semi-bare, and then on to full bears later. Oh, but when you confront them, they say something to the effect of they are just a friend, but they are a friend that just really gets me. Any notion that perhaps something nefarious is afoot is met with gaslighting. When I was going round and round with my ex-wife and her multiple affairs that almost always began via texting, I had the nerve to ask her, "Why don't you just effing stop? Like, what is it about your brain that either tells you to joke about sex with another man, or if the man jokes about it first keeps you from telling him to F off?" Anyways, reading through stories on here just helps affirm to me these are fundamentally broken people who by and large subscribe to the Hollywood tropes of what cheating is like. Just something on my mind this morning that cheaters can't even be original enough in their cheating and are also absolutely terrible at covering up their lies. Date 2. It's been a year. I realized it's been a year since my ex-spouse moved out of my house, and that this community helped me realize my marriage was overdue to her infidelity. In late 2022, I figured you all deserve an update. Update 2. TLDR. On the affair, wife cheated on me in 2017, we reconciled, and then she did it again in 2022. It's been a year since she moved out and our divorce was finalized. First off, my relationship with her is fine. We share 2 children, so that part was never going to change. I couldn't just cut her out of my life, and I did want to make sure my kids didn't end up in therapy. Our relationship I would call good. We can communicate fine. We are able to ask each other for child coverage during work trips, hiccups in the schedule, etc. We have 50-50 custody, but I do pay child support, but otherwise my relationship with her is friendly but not a friendship. We live in Ohio, and her affair partner this last time lived in Florida while she continued this relationship, and he left his child in Florida with his ex to buy a house with her about 3 mil from where I live. They bought their house in November 2023. He lost his job in December 2023. I do not know why, but he did, and he is, as of this posting, still unemployed. Let me be clear in saying that my ex cannot afford the house they purchased on her own. She makes about $56,000 per year, and their house was $45,000. They took out a loan for $365,000. It's not my problem. It is, however, funny our friends have largely sided with me and alienated her because I was direct about what happened. Her affair partner I have met. The first time I met him, he wouldn't look at me, but I actually initiated it and show his hand and said, "His name, my name. I know you very well from all the pictures and texts you sent her name." Since then, anytime I've seen him, he does not look at me. I love it. Second off, my kids. Kids are great. They seem to not have a major issue with the split and do appreciate their time with each parent. However, when his kid comes to visit, he has to sleep in my daughter's room. She's 9, he's 4, and the first time they brought him up here, he was very scared and basically talked to my daughter all night. A note on this. Literally, he moved away in November, he came to Ohio in December, landed on a plane, and 2 hours later was put in a house he's never been in a bed he's never slept in, with a girl he's never met and expected to be fine. My daughter prefers my house in this situation because she says she can actually go to sleep. Lastly, me. I'm thriving. I live in our marital house because I could afford it and she couldn't, so I didn't have to move. She was also so effing eager to leave to the point where I got an excellent deal on the equity buyout and literally got all the furniture and belongings except 1 couch, 1 TV, her vanity, and that's basically it. I met a wonderful person that is truly just a breath of fresh air. She is a divorcee whose spouse also cheated on her, so she understands what I've gone through and is also adamantly against cheating or polyamory or whatever. My kids have really come to love her. She's a wonderful human being and a beautiful soul. She loves to cook with me. I did literally all the housework when I was married, is motivated and driven, and she guided me through a very difficult time in my life because she had lived it. I hate that I pay child support but was able to negotiate a significant portion out of our state guidelines, so it's not terrible. I hate that I don't see my kids half the time but do appreciate the freedom that I get half the time. I've traveled more this past year than I have basically my entire life. I have many more vacations and getaways on my schedule. My recommendations to you: get therapy. I saw a therapist who helped me so much. I experienced so much. Is this my fault I was cheated on? See, and she helped me understand how much it wasn't my fault. Do it even if you don't think you need it. Do it. Move on. Get on with your life. Even if you miss your ex, move on. It's time. Do whatever that means to you. If that means dating, great. If that means doing dumb shit for a little bit, do it. Do the things that make you feel good. Take the trip you've always wanted to take. Go out with friends. Spend some money. Have a good time again. Don't run cover for them. Tell your friends why you broke up. Tell them about the affair. Tell them the details. Your ex doesn't get to control you anymore. Love yourself. You didn't cause them to cheat. Every single person has recourse if they are unhappy in a relationship. They can break up with you, they can divorce you, they don't have to cheat. They cheat because they are miserable humans, and if they do it once, they'll do it again. Have peace. That's my last bit of advice. Find peace with yourself and your life, however that might be. Be healthy, be safe, be smart, but find peace however it takes. Things do get better, they will get better, but you have to let it, you have to move on, and you will thrive again. Update 3. A tip for betrayed spouses. If you're coming in here seeking advice, you may get a lot of hire a lawyer, or you should leave now advice that seems very cliché and overstated. Let me share with you something. You will never get better terms on a divorce settlement than when your WS is in the affair fog, and you should take advantage of it. Our waywards are deluded into thinking they've found their new ever after, and they often are so eager to leave their marriage to be with their AP that they will do very dumb things to get out of the relationship as soon as possible. Me personally, I kept the house, was able to get her to accept a lower home valuation and therefore lower buyout, which saved at least $35,000, as well as being able to have us each keep our own retirements instead of a QDRO, which would have netted her at least another $40,000. I negotiated off child support to 30% under guidelines with no alimony. It is no doubt difficult to make this decision, but when you hear people telling you to take the leap, it means you can also have excellent financial benefits to doing so. There is no better fog than affair fog. Look out for yourselves, don't worry about them. Edit to add. If you're a smart person who does their research, you can also convince them to not hire an attorney and do the dissolution representing yourselves, as long as you come to agreements on everything. I.e., no one will be smart enough to tell them they are getting the raw end of the deal. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Wife used Bumble BFF to find her soulmate behind my back. After months of lies, I exposed their affair during a dinner in front of everyone. Now she wants me back. My wife and I have been married for almost 15 years. We were high school sweethearts and each other's first partner. We were always told growing up that we had puppy love and it wasn't going to last as long as we thought it would. We started getting very serious about each other in high school, and our parents warned us against that. However, we didn't take any of their advice. We both got jobs and moved in with each other right after high school, and a year later we were getting married. Altogether, we have been together for 20 years. We did everything together. She was my best friend, and I thought she was my soulmate. Over the years, we had 2 kids, and we managed to buy our house and settle down into a nice little life. I worked in construction and eventually took on a bigger role in the company, so my wife didn't have to work. She stayed home and took care of the house and the kids, and we were completely fine with that. One of the only fortunate things about our relationship was that we were the only people we needed. Over the years, friends came and went, but we were always together. That didn't bother me because I was pretty introverted and didn't have the desire to go out with friends often. However, my wife was different. She wanted those friends, and she wanted to have girls' nights and go drink wine and gossip at a friend's house. I knew she felt lonely sometimes, so I tried to make her feel loved as much as possible. But my company wasn't the same as the company of a good girlfriend. She saw a targeted ad for Bumble one day, and if you don't know, they have a friend feature. My wife told me about it and she downloaded it with me. She explicitly told me that she was downloading it so I wouldn't see the Bumble app on her phone and think she was cheating. We looked through some of the people who had accounts together, and she started messaging some people. It was a lot of talking and virtual friendships at first, but then a couple of people wanted to get together in person. She went out with one woman a few times and they really clicked. I met her when my wife invited her over for dinner. She seemed nice and my wife got along with her well, but my wife wanted to have more than just one friend. She continued using the app to try to find some people to expand her friend group with. I wasn't pestering her about who she was talking to because from what it looked like to me, she only had women showing up on her page. I didn't realize that men showed up on it as well. They just didn't use the friend part of the app as often. My wife started talking to someone else on the app, and I assumed it was another woman. They were talking regularly, and my wife was always happy to talk to them. She met them for coffee a few times, and they went to run errands together around town while I was at work and the kids were at school. I never thought twice about it. They had a very gender-neutral name for this. I'll call them John. Whenever my wife would tell me about him, I just assumed it was a woman. She never told me that it was a man because she knew I would have been uncomfortable with it. I only realized it was a man when she invited me to dinner with him. We got to the restaurant and he was already waiting for us at the table, and I thought that his partner was going to be coming out any minute and that was who my wife was talking about. But when I saw them together, I immediately started worrying. They had a ton of jokes with each other. They seemed like they had a vast shared history together even though they only knew each other for a month and a half. They seemed to be a lot closer than I thought they were. They mentioned going places and doing things that I had no idea they did. It occurred to me that there was a lot my wife wasn't telling me about their relationship. When everything was over and we went home, I brought everything up to my wife. I told her that I had no idea that John was a guy, and I didn't know if I was okay with a relationship. She got defensive and told me that I was controlling. I didn't want to come across that way, and I did see where she was coming from, but she wasn't seeing what I was seeing. It looked like they were both giddy to be around each other. My wife swore up and down that nothing happened between them, and they just meshed so well together that she didn't want to cut him off. I trusted my wife and I wanted her to be happy, so I just kept an eye on things. Looking back, she was having an emotional affair before anything else. I started to realize that she stopped coming to me about a lot of things, and she was going to John about those things. She was complaining about me to him and getting things out of the relationship that she wasn't getting from me anymore. We stopped talking about a lot of things, and eventually we stopped having sex with each other. I think that was where their affair turned from emotional to physical. There were several weeks where it seemed like she was going to see JN at least 3 times a week. She was spending far too much time with him. I was getting pretty fed up with behavior, and it seemed like my wife just wasn't telling me the truth about everything they were doing. So I went through her phone. I found dozens of messages between both of them where they were confessing their feelings for each other. Apparently, she was at his house and they got a little too tipsy and he kissed her. Initially, my wife told him that she was married and they couldn't see each other. He accepted that. Then a day later, my wife told him that she couldn't stop thinking about it. They both agreed to see where the relationship could go. From the way it sounded, they slept together the next time they saw each other. JN told my wife that he thought he loved her, and my wife said the same thing. My wife was opposed to getting a divorce though, and she told him that at least not until the kids were in college. John told her that he could wait. I was heartbroken and angry, and I wanted to get revenge on both of them for lying to me and going behind my back. My gut instinct about them not being together was right, and my wife made me feel guilty for thinking that anything could happen. I wanted to get back at her badly. Before I found out what I did, my wife told me that John wanted to get together for dinner again. Knowing what I did about their affair, it rubbed me the wrong way that he wanted that. It seemed almost cruel that he would go out of his way to spend time with me because I wanted to humiliate them. I agreed to go. We got a babysitter for the night, and we went out to a nice restaurant. John brought a date with him, which was surprising to me. My wife hadn't mentioned anything about him seeing anyone. Seemed new, but knowing what I did, I figured it was probably a farce. Dinner started nicely, and everybody got to know each other better. I made sure I wasn't drinking anything because I wanted to be as level-headed as possible. When the prime opportunity for me to send my piece came, the dining room at the restaurant was pretty crowded, and it was tame for the most part. We lived in a small town, so I even recognized some of the people there. Toward the middle of the meal, I decided I was going to stand up and give a toast. Everybody else at the table was a little taken aback by the gesture because it was a strange thing to do at a friendly gathering. I told John how happy I was that he met my wife. I knew that she wouldn't be alone when I left her. He awkwardly laughed, and I turned to my wife to tell her that I knew exactly what was happening and there was no point in lying. By that point, the date that John brought was off put by him, and several other people in the dining room were watching as I finished my toast. My wife was quietly asking me to stop and tugging on my arm for me to sit down. I could tell she was embarrassed by what I was saying. When everything was over, I left the dining room, and my wife followed behind me. She chastised me for embarrassing her in front of everybody in the restaurant, but I told her she'd humiliated me. She ended up telling me that she felt like she wasn't getting everything she wanted out of the relationship. She said she had been feeling the way for a while and she wished that things could have been different. She even told me that if she could have done everything over again, she wouldn't have married me right out of high school. If I had known then what I know now, I would have done the exact same thing. Our parents were right to suggest we didn't get together so young. That didn't excuse the fact that she cheated on me. Never once in our relationship had I even considered that as an option. I told her that we would be getting a divorce and that was all there was to it. I didn't care if she wanted to stay together for the kids. I wanted to get one immediately. I figured it would be better to have them in separate households than one household with parents who couldn't stand each other. We ended up going through a divorce, and my wife didn't get anything from me. We have joint custody of the kids, which I still stand by as being the best decision for us. It came to my attention that she tried blaming me for breaking up the family. My kids were angry with me at first. I didn't like knowing that she was lying to them, so I told them the truth. Their attitudes changed quickly after that. Our youngest never wants to visit with her anymore, and I have to force them to go. About a year ago, my wife suggested that we try to work things out for the kids' sake. I saw through what she wanted right away. I think she missed being married and having the traditional familial household. She probably also didn't like that her kids hated her for what she did. I told her there was no way I would ever consider it. She and John tried staying together for a while after the divorce, but it didn't work out. Honestly, I think they only liked each other because of the allure of a secret romance. The words about the affair traveled quickly in town, and I think that affected John's dating prospects too. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Watched my gold digger Mill steal my husband's wallet at his funeral and run up over $100,000 in credit card bills over a month. I let her use it, then reported her to the police. I, 28F, recently lost my husband to leukemia. My husband and I had been married for 3 years before this, and his diagnosis was revealed to us just a month after our marriage. It was a devastating time for us, but my husband was a brave man, and he was really strong for us until he just couldn't be strong and brave anymore. He succumbed about a month ago, and I have still been trying to cope with the loss. He and I met in college and started dating shortly after graduation when I ran into him at the company where I was supposed to be entering at. We were not friends in college, but we knew each other and sometimes talked to each other. I liked him, but I was too shy to do anything about it, and I think so was he, so it never fructified when we were in college. But when we ran into each other afterward, I took it as a sign from the universe, and we started dating. I don't regret anything. We spent a lot of beautiful years together, and all the best memories of my life have been with him. He was a wonderful, smart, sweet, and amazingly beautiful person, which is probably why I put up with his mother. My mother-in-law, Veronica, is not a nice person. I hate to say this about another woman, but I had always known that she was a total gold digger. Let's look at the math here. Veronica is just 48. This means she had my husband when she was just 20, but my father-in-law is almost 60. I don't know his exact age, but he is in his late 50s, so that means that Veronica got knocked up by a man almost 2 decades older than her when she was just 20. Had I been talking about somebody else, I probably would have given them the benefit of the doubt and wouldn't have labeled them a gold digger. But honestly, Veronica was just that. How do I know that? Well, let's just say that she pretty much confessed to it herself. The first time that I met her was at dinner, and she was in the middle of her 3rd divorce. She separated from my husband's father when my husband was about 5 years old, and it was because apparently suddenly his advanced age had become a really big problem for her. She was just 20 and didn't even have a college degree, so she had never worked a day in her life. She had been a stay-at-home mom and had married my husband's father as soon as she could. She locked him down, stayed with him for a couple of years, and then filed for divorce and walked away with a huge settlement in alimony. She lived off of that for a couple of years, and that, combined with the child support, was enough for her. I know all of this because she bragged about it and wouldn't stop talking about herself, sufficient and street smart she had been from a really young age. She told me that it was important for women all around the world to be able to look out for themselves, and she thought she was the perfect example of that. Then she found her second husband, and he was a bigger fish compared to her last. He was also almost 15 years older than Veronica, and Veronica was just in her late 20s at the time, so she was still pretty young and attractive. The guy had his own business, so obviously he was a perfect man for Veronica. She flexed about how he was a married man, but she managed to impress him and win him over somehow. She laughed about how she had managed to break up their marriage and get him to divorce his wife just for her. He got married just a month after his divorce came through, and by then Veronica was already pregnant with her second child. She gave birth to her daughter and stayed with her second husband for a significantly longer time. This time she stayed with him until her daughter was 8 years old, but unfortunately this time it was her husband who cheated, but it was better for her because she still got alimony and child support, and these were rich guys that we were talking about, so you best believe that the money was flowing in. Even when she was talking about her second husband, It didn't feel for even a second that she had any regrets about it. She didn't seem to feel bad about the fact that she had broken up somebody's marriage just because she wanted him, and neither did she seem to feel bad about the fact that this guy had turned out to be a douchebag and cheated on her as well. To her, it probably seemed just like a deal that happened after the divorce, and her relationships were definitely purely transactional in nature. And finally, she started seeing her third husband a few years after her divorce from her second husband. At the time, she was probably around 39, and she was done having kids because she was sick of putting her body through that. 2 had been enough, her words, not mine. Her third and last husband was around her age, in his 40s, and he was also a businessman. I think it's safe to say that Veronica had a type, and that type was a rich businessman who had a ton of money and would always keep her happy. She got married after around 2 years of dating and got divorced after 3 years of marriage. The reason for that was she wanted to be free. Marriage just wasn't sitting right with her anymore because apparently it was a lot of work for very little payout, and her third husband was apparently really suspicious of her all the time, so she just couldn't deal with it and wanted out. She had enough money now, thanks to all the child support in alimony. She had saved some from it and was probably going to get compensated from her third divorce as well. This is the story that she told me when I met her for the first time at dinner, and obviously the first impression was not a great one. I did not like her at all, and I honestly felt sick. The fact that she had done these things was not as bad as the fact that she was bragging about them and making herself seem like some clever, resourceful, independent woman. She genuinely thought that she was a self-made woman, and it was pretty disturbing to hear her talk about her past. So yes, she was a gold digger and she was proud of it. Now, I actually didn't even get to meet my mother-in-law for a really long time. My husband and I started dating when we were in our early 20s, around 22. But he didn't introduce me to Veronica until we had been together for 2 years because, unsurprisingly, he was not on board with his mother's lifestyle. He knew that she was a gold digger, and he was pretty ashamed of it. He had told me about it after we had been together for almost a year, and I had kept asking him why he was not introducing me to his mother. He had introduced me to his dad since he was a lot closer to him, but when I kept asking him and I didn't drop the topic, he told me that he was embarrassed and he hadn't even told his mother about me yet. He said that he was afraid that I wouldn't like her because, well, you know why, and that would somehow jeopardize our relationship. Only after I had comforted him and reassured him that no matter how bad his mother was, it would not affect our relationship, he introduced me to her. My husband had warned me about her and told her that her lifestyle choices were ones that I would never agree with, but I had not expected it to be that bad, and I definitely hadn't expected Veronica to be proud of what she was. After that first meeting, I didn't keep in touch with her, and thankfully, she didn't try to stay in touch either. My husband would visit her occasionally, but that was about it. He didn't cut ties with her because, despite everything, she was still his mom, and he told me that he would feel guilty abandoning her, since he was the only positive and permanent fixture in her life. Even her daughter didn't talk to her anymore, and she pretty much had nobody to rely on. That was not a surprise at all, but I was really happy that my husband was such a good person. I did talk to my father-in-law about Veronica, and he told me that he really regrets having anything to do with her. He told me that he loves his son and that's probably the best thing that she could have given him, but he had been having a midlife crisis because he had been single for a really long time when he met Veronica on a dating app. He had considered that she might be with him for the money, but when she got pregnant and decided to keep the baby and insisted that they get married as soon as possible, he couldn't say no because it would be immoral and unethical of him, so he agreed. And when she stayed with him even after the birth of my husband, he actually started to believe that she might have genuine feelings for him. But of course, that was not true, and she left as soon as she could. That really messed him up, and he couldn't really bring himself to trust other people again. Of course, he has had relationships after that, but he says that it's just never been the same for him again. So while he continued to suffer because of what Veronica did to him, she was living it up with no regrets and seemed to be having the time of her life with her husband and her alimony. Anyway, he regretted his first marriage with her, and he was a good man. As far as I knew, Veronica had never been a good person, and that was pretty evident from her history and her attitude towards her past. I wouldn't say that I have had a bad relationship with Veronica because that would not be true. I haven't had any sort of relationship with her at all. Ever since I got married to my husband, I've met her only at family events. She even attends those really selectively, and more often than not, She's missing because she has other parties to attend since she is just a socialite, and I'm grateful for it. I don't think I would want to meet her more often. She was there at our wedding, but she didn't stay for long and cleared out as soon as she realized that my father-in-law was going to stick around. She was very distant from the family, and I appreciated that because I did not want her around. That did not change even after my husband's diagnosis. She would rarely ever visit, and since my husband was not well enough to visit her, they stopped seeing each other altogether. She would maybe call once in a while, but that was pretty much it. She never put in more of an effort to stay in touch with him or even to check up on him, which I thought was particularly cruel and disgusting, given the fact that he had never abandoned his mother, even though he had every reason to cut her off because she was straight up a bad person and an even worse mother. But he never gave up on her, and the least that she could have done for him was at least visit him a couple of times when he was sick and couldn't even get out of bed because he was too weak. However, she did not, and I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I really wasn't. Anyway, this went on for 3 years, and my husband put up a really good fight. Like I said, he was a really strong and brave man, and I am so proud that I was able to have known him the way that I did, but he just couldn't fight anymore. And a couple of months ago, we were told that he might not make it, so he got his affairs in order while I tried to cope with the fact that he wouldn't be around anymore while also trying to make the best of my time with him here. The last few months were beautiful, and even though he was really weak and could barely do anything for himself, it was all I needed to go on living for the rest of my life. I can't believe that it's over, but unfortunately, this is all the time that I had with him. Naturally, when he passed away, I was devastated, and I could barely bring myself to do anything, but I had promised myself that I would be the one to organize his funeral, and I decided to power through everything and arrange for a funeral as beautiful as he was. As I said, Veronica had barely been in touch with us for the past few years, ever since his diagnosis, but then last year, she started visiting and talking to my husband more often. We gradually realized that this was not because she was turning over a new leaf but just because her money was running out. There is only so much you can do with limited money and no source of income. Add to that an absolute lack of financial responsibility, you have a quick way of going broke on your hands, and that's what happened to Veronica. She had been living extravagantly for the past few years, and it was a miracle that the money that she had been saving for the years before it even lasted her that long. But now she had exhausted most of her funds and was buttering my husband because she needed help paying off all her bills and still maintaining her lifestyle. My husband was a kind man, but he was no fool, and he knew exactly what his mother was trying to do. But he was way too sick to put up a fight with her or demand that she stopped coming to see him, so instead, he decided to deal with it as slightly as he could and kept on delaying the conversation. Anytime his mother would start talking to him about money, he would steer the conversation somewhere else, and he played it really well. He was clever about it and was able to evade her for almost a year, which was pretty impressive, and Veronica was low. But she wasn't stupid enough to directly demand money from her suffering son. Anyway, my husband was able to evade that for as long as he was alive, and I knew for a fact that Veronica would never demand or even ask for money from me because we definitely did not have that kind of relationship, and around the time of the funeral I wasn't even thinking about any of this. Anyway, I was really busy on the day of the funeral because there were a lot of guests to attend to, and I had a lot of work. I didn't even have enough time to grieve because my husband was a pretty well-known guy, and he was loved deeply by a lot of people, so it was no wonder that a lot of people had attended his funeral. It was actually pretty sweet. At one point, I thought I had come upstairs because I needed to freshen up a little, but that's when I heard noises from my husband's room. Guests were supposed to limit themselves to the downstairs area, so I had no idea why anybody would come up, and I decided to peek into the room to check out who had come up. I was shocked when I realized that it was Veronica who was puttering around in the room. She had her back turned to me, so she couldn't see me, but I could see her very well, and she was going through stuff on my husband's bedside table. I was about to go in and confront her, but something told me to wait and see what she does because I was curious. A few seconds later, I noticed that she grabbed something small and shoved it into her purse as quickly as she could. I decided to walk away from the door, went to the bathroom, and waited for her to go back down. After she was gone and I had heard her leaving, I decided to go into my husband's room and check what was missing. I realized that it was my husband's wallet that she had shoved into her purse. My husband's wallet still contained all the cards that belonged to him, and I hadn't touched it after his passing. He had spent his last couple of days in the hospital, and the wallet had been at home because I wasn't going to let him use it for anything, so it had stayed in its place. And since I was having the funeral just 4 days after his demise, his lawyer and I hadn't had the time to cancel his financial tie-ups either. We figured we would do it in the due course of time because, anyway, it was not going to be in use, so it wouldn't matter. But when I saw Veronica take that wallet and leave, I knew that she was going to use it for her own gain. For a few minutes after that, I was just disgusted by how heartless and psychotic this was. I can't imagine anybody who would attend their own son's funeral and then steal their wallet. I mean, that's literally crazy, but I decided to let her get away with it because I knew that this was going to be illegal, and she would get into a whole lot of trouble for it. I didn't care about the consequences because I wasn't the one who was going to have to face anything. So the day went on as usual, and Veronica left shortly after I had seen her in the bedroom. I saw her sneaking out, not even daring to say goodbye to me, her son's widow. For the next few weeks, I didn't hear from her at all, and I knew that she was up to something, but I didn't know what. The next few weeks, I was barely in touch with anybody because I was still sorting out all the legal aspects because my husband was now gone. The only person I spoke to was his lawyer, and since they had been really close friends when he was alive, he had known everything about Veronica, and I felt comfortable telling him what I had let her get away with. I just wanted to make sure that I wouldn't get into trouble for permitting this to happen, and he told me that it was unlikely, and even if I did get questioned, then I could just say that I was grieving and people would pretty much believe it without a second thought. So that's how it went, and earlier this week, Veronica finally got back in touch with me, and she told me that she had accidentally picked up my husband's wallet at the funeral and hadn't even realized it for so long. But now that she had discovered it, she wanted to return it to me so I could cancel all the cards and stuff. I told her to visit me instead because I had already spoken to people at the bank and asked them to mail me an itemized bank statement for all the expenses on both the cards, and they had done so just a few days before Veronica reached out to me. I had also gotten the cards canceled, which was definitely by Veronica. I wanted to return them because now they were just pieces of plastic and were useless to her, but she didn't want me to know that they were not working because, otherwise, I would realize that she had been using them. Little did she know that I already knew everything, and she was about to get screwed. She visited me a couple of hours after the phone call, and once she was here, I didn't even waste a second before handing her the bank statement for the credit card, and I've got to say, she was really not holding back on her expenses. She had racked up a debt of more than $100,000 in less than a month, and very little of it was from paying off her essential bills. Most of it was frivolous expenses and, funnily enough, flight tickets to another city every weekend for the past month. But I don't want to get into that. The point was that she had spent a lot of money, and I told her that I knew she had been the one to take the card on purpose, and she had been using it so far. It was really stupid of her to expect to get away with something like this because, of course, banks keep track of what you spend and where you spend it. She was shocked, but she recovered quickly and told me that this was her son's money, so she was allowed to do whatever she wanted with it, and I was nobody to question her right. I thought that it was crazy because it was the credit card that she had been using, not the debit, so she had actually been racking up debt for him, not spending the money that he already had. I told her that she had better return the money and clear the debt, or else I would be forced to tell the bank officials that the card had gone missing after my husband's funeral, and I hadn't even noticed it until recently when I canceled all of them, and then I would tell them that it was she who was using it, which was illegal, and they would have no problem tying her to the card because there were obviously other expenses and records to prove it. So then she would go to prison and would stay there until she was really old. She started throwing a fit as soon as I said all of that and told me that I was the most horrible person on earth for letting this happen and screwing her over on purpose. She believed that what I did was pure evil and morally wrong on so many levels that she couldn't even fathom that anybody in the right mind would be capable of something like this. I think she must have cursed at me for around half an hour before she finally left in tears. I've already spoken to the bank since then and told them that the card had gone missing, and now they are going to deal with her. The problem is that I was recently talking to my mother about this, and I told her all about what I had pulled off and that Veronica might even go to jail now. I thought that I had been righteous, and I still think so because all of this could have been avoided if Veronica hadn't been a nasty little thief. But unfortunately, my mother thinks that what I did was horrifying, and she can't even speak to me because she agrees with Veronica and believes that what I did was too much. She hasn't been speaking to me and says that if I testify against Veronica, then she'll never speak to me again. I don't understand how this is my fault because I was not the one who was stealing my son's wallet at his funeral to pay for God knows what and support my extravagant lifestyle. I feel like my mom is making a big deal out of this, but I feel really bad now. Aita for allowing my mother-in-law to steal my husband's wallet at his funeral just to get her in trouble. Date 1. Hi, so most of you are of the opinion that both Veronica and I are messed up. That might be true, but at least I'm not a thief, and at least I was not using my son's credit card to go see my lover every weekend. Yep, I received a call from the guy that she had been seeing, and he told me that what I had done was disgusting and I better watch my back. So far, I've been facing the consequences of my actions. My mom is not talking to me, and my dad thinks that this is going to be a difficult problem to fix because my mother is really big on morals and ethics and stuff, and I also have to worry about some guy who is threatening me. So no, so far this has not been great, and I'm actually kind of worried about what might happen next. My husband's lawyer, his friend, has told me that he's going to be there for me no matter what, so that's reassuring, but I'm still feeling kind of weird about what has been happening because there is a 100% chance that Veronica might end up in jail. Update 2. Hello. Just wanted to inform you guys quickly that my mother has threatened to disinherit me if I testify against Veronica in court, and that is literally the craziest thing. I don't know why she's doing it, but I have decided that I'm not going to let her get to me. Yes, what I did might have been wrong, and it came from a place of hatred and revenge, but I didn't ask Veronica to rack up a debt of this crazy amount. I didn't ask her to steal the wallet and use the credit cards of her deceased son. She did that all on her own, and even if I hadn't been involved, she definitely would have gotten into trouble for it, so I don't know why my mother thinks that it's okay to blame me. If she has to blame somebody and have the moral high ground, it should be Veronica and not me. Update 3. Hey everyone. So it's been a couple of weeks since I came online here, and I have been really busy. My mother has decided to cut all ties with me. She didn't remove me from her will because my dad didn't agree with it, but she says that if I testify against Veronica, then she will literally never speak to me again. She says that she wants to believe that she raised a good person, and I'm not acting like one right now. Honestly, I don't even know what that is supposed to mean because I'm not trying to be a good person right now. I'm just trying to do right by my husband and myself. That's all that I'm interested in doing. So for her to say weird stuff like that and expect me to feel bad about it, it's just stupid. The trial has already begun, and I'm supposed to appear in court for the testimony in a couple of days. I already know what I'm going to say, and I know that Veronica will get a lot of heat for this, but do you know what? It's not my fault, and I refuse to be blamed for it. I'm not going to take accountability for somebody else's psychotic behavior and be okay with it. I'm sorry, but that is not how this works. So my mother can be as mad as she wants to and even stick to what she said and not talk to me ever again. But I'm not backing down anymore. Sometimes being right is more important than being good, especially when it comes to people like Veronica, who have never been taught a lesson in their life. My father-in-law actually thinks that this is great, and she totally deserves it because she had it coming for a long time, so there at least some people agree with what I'm doing, and these are people who know Veronica the best. I still haven't heard anything from the guy who called me up to threaten me a couple of weeks ago, but I'm not scared anymore. I don't see any reason to be scared of doing the right thing. Update 4. So the trial is over, and Veronica has been sentenced to 10 years in prison. She had been pleading not guilty in the beginning, but with time it became pretty clear that that was not true. It feels really weird that another person is going to be in prison because of what I said, but this was bound to happen. It's crazy, but yeah, that's what happened. My mother lived up to her promise and has blocked me everywhere after telling me that she was really disappointed in me and that she was never going to speak to me for the rest of her days. I don't know what's going to happen with us, but I'm not going to apologize for anything because I don't care. My dad and I are still in touch and are going to continue speaking to each other because he's not a weirdo who thinks it's wrong to send bad people to jail. So that's about it. Now that everything's wrapped up, I'm going to try and process my husband's passing and cope with that. Thank you so much for hearing me out here. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Girlfriend of 4 years suddenly broke up with me, and then her friend wanted to hook up. Now, my ex-girlfriend is back and is claiming that her friend manipulated her into breaking up. I, 28M, am really confused about the events of the last month. My ex-GF, Julie, 29F, thinks that my current GF, Mindy, 28F, is manipulative and sabotaged our 4-year relationship. I was in a loving relationship with Julie for the last 4 years. We met through some mutual friends. Julie and I were very compatible in terms of our love for outdoor activities and running. We had very similar lifestyles and supported each other well for the last 4 years. We have also been living together for the last 3 years. We even discussed getting married during the summer. Everything was great, and I was planning to propose to her over the holidays. However, I started to see changes in behavior in Julie around September. She was acting distant and looked stressed. It was quite noticeable, and I was worried. I trust her with all my heart, and I could not imagine she would be cheating on me. However, she did spend more time by herself. Around the same time, Julie's friend, Mindy, messaged me privately and asked me if I could meet her secretly as she wanted to tell me something about Julie. Mindy and Julie work together, and I have known Mindy ever since I started dating Julie. I was surprised, but to be honest, I assumed the worst. I met her at a cafe after work. She asked me if things were going okay between Julie and me. She told me that Julie told her that she was planning to leave me soon. This was a total shock to me. I asked her if there was anyone else that Julie was interested in, and she told me no. Julie confided in her that she was not sure about marrying me. She told me she just had to tell me this as she did not want me to be blindsided. I was devastated. I started putting more effort into making our relationship more exciting and planning more dates, etc. Mindy was also helping me through this time and telling me more about what Julie told her. Eventually, before Thanksgiving, Julie told me that she loved me, but she wanted to take a break for a month to live alone. She said that she just wanted to live alone for a month to make sure she wanted to marry me. I was completely heartbroken. I asked her if she wanted to pursue someone else. She told me that was not the case, and I better not do anything stupid either. She loves me with all her heart, but she just wants to stay away from me to make sure that she is marrying me for love and not because she is used to being with me. I did not understand that at all. I told her that if she is not sure after 4 years if she wants to marry me, then maybe we should just break up. We had a big fight and broke up. After a few days, as our lease was ending, we decided to part ways in December. She got a new apartment, and I kept our old apartment and just took her name off the lease. After the breakup, I was feeling very lonely as I was not used to being in the apartment alone. I didn't want to keep on being sad and hence invited a bunch of friends for a New Year's party. I also invited Mindy. We had a good time, and my friends were doing their best to cheer me up. Mindy also mingled with my friends, and it was good. Mindy decided to stay back to help me clean up, and we hooked up that night. I felt guilty, but Mindy did cheer me up. Since then, we have hung out almost daily at my place. I am still sad about Julie, but I won't lie that being with Mindy does make me feel happy. She is sweet and caring. Last Sunday, we woke up and someone was banging on the door. I went to open it and it was Julie. She looked furious and started yelling at me. She kept on accusing me of cheating on her. I told her I most certainly did not cheat on her, and she was the one who broke up with me. Mindy was also at my apartment. Julie was just angry at both of us. She started calling Mindy a manipulative and told me that Mindy was the one who suggested to her that she should take some time away from me to understand her true feelings. I calmed her down and asked her to explain herself. She told me that ever since our marriage talk, she told Mindy about it, and Mindy kept on asking Julie if she was sure about marrying me. Mindy suggested she take some time to herself to understand her true feelings and that I will understand and give her space. When I said no, Mindy convinced her that I was so controlling that I could not even give her 1 month to herself and convinced her to break up with me. Mindy told me that she did not say any such things, and these were all Julie's ideas, and she was just there during these conversations. She did tell Julie that she told me about some of the things so that I get a chance to make things right with her over the last few months. That made Julie more angry, and she started accusing me of emotionally cheating on her. Julie told me that the last few weeks have made her realize that we were meant to be together, but she now cannot believe I could move on from a 4-year relationship in a week. On one hand, I want to believe Julie, but she broke up with me for no fault of my own. Mindy was there for me when I was down, but now I also doubt her. She suddenly started talking to me out of the blue as we were never really close before, and immediately became my support after the breakup, although Julie was her close friend. Am I the odd to emotionally cheat on Julie? Should I have told her about Mindy's texts? Should I have not moved on from her so quickly even though Julie broke up with me? I was just hurting, and Mindy was right there to support me. I need advice from someone with a clear mind on what is going on. Date 1. I-28M. Posted last week regarding my girlfriend, Julie, 29F, accusing her friend and coworker, Mindy, 28F, of sabotaging our relationship. Julie broke up with me in December after a 4-year relationship, and Mindy reached out to me when I was feeling down. However, when Julie realized Mindy was talking to me, she confronted both of us last Sunday morning and told me that Mindy manipulated her to break up with me. The worst part was I was not thinking straight after the breakup and ended up hooking up with Mindy after a New Year's party. After the incident, I asked that I needed some time and did not meet her since then. I made the following post on Reddit and had 3,000 people call me an idiot. I am sorry for the long post, but I wanted to say that we were not idiots to not see what happened. You guys read an abridged version of events in 5 minutes, while we lived it for the last 7 months. I messaged Julie every day since then to try and talk to her. She did not reply to my messages. I was not sure if she blocked me. Mindy was constantly trying to message me, asking if we could meet and talk about it. On Wednesday, one day after posting, I decided to message Mindy. I told her to tell me everything she said to Julie truthfully. I told her I would go and see if I found out that she was lying. Mindy wanted to meet me in person or talk to me on the phone, but I wanted everything in writing. She messaged me that Julie always said good things about me for all these years. When Julie told her about us talking about getting married in 2024, she was happy for both of us. However, Julie started telling her that she had cold feet and was not sure if she wanted to marry me because of issues she observed about her parents' marriage. One day, Julie told her she wanted to take a break from me. She was not sure about her true feelings for me. That was the time Mindy told me about Julie's behavior as she felt bad for me, as we were already telling our families about the engagement plans. After our fight, she said that Julie was extremely upset and told Mindy that she would never marry me. She said that the only reason Julie came back was when she heard that I was moving on as she is jealous of us. She also said that I was a good guy and hopefully, I see that what we have is something special. I just said okay and told her I needed time. I kept on messaging Julie once a day to at least talk to her once. It was heartbreaking to think that she may have blocked me and may never talk to me again. On Friday afternoon, Julie finally replied. She said she wanted to meet me and told me she would come to our apartment on Saturday afternoon. I cleaned the place up and was just feeling deep guilt from inside before facing her. When she came in, she looked like a shell of herself and completely broken. I sat on our sofa, but she chose to sit away from me. We asked how we both were, but it was clear that none of us were doing well. I started apologizing, but she stopped me. She asked me to let her finish and not to interrupt her. She had brought her little notebook and had written down things she wanted to say to me. She told me that she truly loved me, but after we discussed getting married, she started feeling scared of the next big step. She thought those feelings were normal and would go away, so she decided to not discuss her concerns with me. Kept on eating her from inside, and she made a mistake to talk to Mindy about them. She said that she wanted to say everything to me now so I don't get secondhand information about why she was distant and broke up with me. She said that her parents had a very rocky marriage. Though they were together until her mom passed away in 2021 during the pandemic, her parents argued constantly, and she always thought her mom did not love her dad. However, her mom was extremely dependent on him for everything, and her dad knew it and hence didn't treat her well. She never wanted to be like her mom after the marriage. However, as we lived together, she started seeing some of those issues in our relationship. For example, when we met, Julie had a lot of credit card debt and was bad at managing her money. I helped her with that. Even though we have separate finances, I ended up managing all her finances, investments, etc., at her request to the point that she did not know or understand where her money exactly was. She also said that we always enjoy making nice meals for dinner every day. However, whenever I work late, she completely loses any motivation to cook and ends up eating cheese and crackers like a toddler for dinner. She also complained that, in the last 4 years of our relationship, I have never said no to her for buying anything. She feels that I coddle her, and she just got comfortable with all the luxuries and things I can provide for her. She talked about this with Mindy, and while Mindy initially just listened to her, she told her around September that one of her cousins also had the same issue. She decided to stay away from her fiancé for a month, and within a week, she realized how much she missed him and never had doubts again. When Julie asked for a break, all she wanted to do was to live with her best friend for a few weeks to see if she was just too codependent on me. She knew I was planning to propose during our Christmas trip to my parents' house, and when I told her that she could not take a break, she just freaked out and broke up with me as she did not want to be engaged without knowing for sure that we won't end up like her parents. After this, she asked me when I started meeting Mindy and how many times we met. I opened my chat messages with Mindy and handed her the phone. I told her I met Mindy only once in September, where she told me that Julie wanted to break up with me because she was not happy with our relationship. I already had noticed Julie's distant behavior, and when I asked her, the only answer I got was, "I am fine. We are fine." Due to my insecurities, I tried to hold on to Julie and started coddling her more, planning more expensive dates and trying to spend more time at home. When Julie asked me for a break and to stay away from me for a few weeks, I thought that was the final step before the breakup and broke down and fought with her, which led to our breakup and our moving out. At this point, Julie's voice started cracking up. She asked me when Mindy contacted you after the breakup. I pointed her to the messages. Mindy initially just started sending me memes to cheer me up, and I just used to respond with thanks or a thumbs up. However, the messages started getting more frequent, and she offered to talk to me in case I needed help. She asked me what I was doing for Christmas and New Year's, and when I told her I was inviting a few friends, she told me that she does not have any plans for New Year's, and I invited her. Julie stopped me there. She told me she did not need to hear the details after that. She told me that when she moved out of our house after our fight, she thought she was just not ready to get married to me. She stayed with her friend for 2 weeks and then got her new apartment in January. She told me that she was miserable and missed me badly. It became more acute when she moved into the apartment alone and could not stay there for even one night. Her best friend is currently staying with her in the new apartment. She realized she could not live without me within a week of living there. When she asked one of our mutual friends on Saturday about how I was doing, she told her about the party and told her Mindy was there. It did not make sense to her why Mindy would be at the party. She concluded that Mindy and I were having an affair during our relationship, and that was the reason Mindy must have tried to break us apart by constantly telling her that she should not get married if she had doubts. When she saw Mindy in our apartment on Sunday, she completely broke down. However, when she learned that Mindy was also talking to me and telling me the opposite things, she realized how naive she was to throw everything away without properly talking to me first. As hurt as she is seeing me with Mindy, she also does not want to lose me. She kept on calling herself idiot and apologizing for not telling her concerns to me sooner. I sat next to her and tried to hug her, but she moved away. She asked me if I was willing to still be together, and I told her I would give anything to get her back. She told me she was also willing to forget what happened, but she had a few conditions. Her first condition was that I cut contact with Mindy. I block her everywhere and never contact her again. If I see her standing in front of me, I act as if she is invisible. I was okay with that. Secondly, she has already signed up for individual therapy and is on the wait list. She wants us to do couples therapy so that we can talk about all the concerns we have and work through them. We also decided to hold off our engagement or marriage until we both can get into couples therapy. I was also okay with that too. Finally, she wanted me to forget the last month as a bad nightmare and never talk about it again. And if I ever make a "we were on a break" joke, she will punch me in the face. This was the first time we both smiled. I asked her what she was going to do about Mindy as they worked together. She said the biggest punishment for Mindy is to know that she did not succeed in breaking us up. She wants Mindy to see how happy she is with me. She wants Mindy to be there when she flaunts her engagement ring in the office and gets jealous when we get married. We hugged, and I felt so relieved that I had a chance to make things right for her. I asked her to stay and she agreed. The rest of the evening was nice. We ordered DoorDash and watched reruns of Top Chef while cuddling on our couch. In the morning, we discussed moving and back together. I want her to move back to our old apartment, but she wants a fresh start and asked me if I'm willing to move into her new apartment. Her new apartment is tiny compared to our current apartment and also not in the best neighborhood, but we will talk about it more and decide. I also will have to deal with the issue of having two 12-month leases and how to get out of one of them. Currently, Julie went to her apartment after lunch to get some of her stuff for the week, and I am writing this post. I am just so lucky that I did not lose Julie despite my terrible actions during the last month. I just hope that I will be able to work things out and get married soon. And this whole incident is a small bump in our perfect relationship. I also don't know how to address the issue where she feels coddled by my behavior and feels like I'm making her codependent on me. It's just my personality, and I need to work on that during couples therapy. However, any tips from you guys are welcome on how to make her feel less codependent. Update 2. Thanks to everyone who checked on my health during the last few days via direct messages and sent me numbers for helplines. Don't worry. I am a marathon runner and don't give up that easy. After the incident, Julie told me that she wants to get back together and forget about the whole thing, but I could see that she was still hurt by my behavior. I tried to not love bomb her and give her space as that was the reason why we broke up in the first place. Julie had a mental breakdown and had a panic attack during the week after she saw Mindy with me in our apartment. She got an online therapist who she still sees once a week. We also looked for couples counseling and were able to see one almost a month after the incident. We decided to put our plans for marriage on hold until then. I could feel that Julie was making a lot of effort to act normally, but something was not right. I was optimistic about us but was hard to see her suffer because of my actions. During our first couples counseling session, we both opened up about our relationship and talked about the incident. Julie apologized to me for not communicating what was in her mind and how bad she felt for putting me through all the drama. She told me that she did not know how to process her thoughts and did not want to unload all her negative feelings on me and panicked in the moment. I also apologized to her about everything, and at one point we were in competition on who gets to take a bigger blame for what happened. There were a lot of tears, and I found the experience very healing. The counselor told us that she could see how much we love each other and should take baby steps towards talking to each other about what is in our mind. She gave us some exercises to do after going home and discuss certain things. By the time we left her office, I was so sure that I want to spend my life with Julie. I told her that, and she also said that she cannot imagine a life without me. We decided to go ahead with our wedding plans. Mindy tried to contact me several times. She messaged me, but Julie blocked her on my phone and all socials. She also contacted Julie and sent some nasty messages to her. The worst was 15 days after the incident when Mindy started posting pictures of me and her on Instagram every day. Some of those photos were intimate, non-nude, and it caused a lot of pain to Julie. Julie reported her to HR and got a transfer and promotion to a different department. After a month, the last I heard from Mindy was when she sent me a long email on my work email, but I deleted it without reading. The photos Mindy posted did cause a lot of drama, and we had to explain to our parents and friends about what happened during that time. As you all may have guessed, I was unanimously nominated for the Idiot of the Year award, but I am sure my sister would give me a good run for it before the year ends. The whole issue lasted for a month, and then we never heard from Mindy again and just moved on with our lives. Julie has been talking to her therapist about her codependency issues and concerns. I think it's childhood trauma, and the therapist feels that it might have amplified after her mother's sudden death. I've been trying to help Julie slowly take interest in our finances, but she is allergic to money talks and always changes the subject. I was able to break the lease that Julie signed by paying some penalty, and we stayed in our old apartment. However, Julie wanted to move out of it as soon as possible because of the bad memories. We purchased a single-family home a few months ago in a nice suburb and moved there in May. I don't think that issue of codependency is resolved and probably may have increased after the incident, but I love her and will always be there for her when she needs me. On to the main update. Julie and I got married last Saturday in a nice intimate ceremony held at my father's country club. All our family and friends were present, and I could not have asked for a better evening. I wish I could share photos of Julie in her wedding dress because she looked stunning. We plan to leave for our honeymoon next week, and I could not have been happier about how things turned out. Hopefully, in 25 years, Julie and I would look back at this incident as a small blip in our perfect life. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Mom shamed me at my pregnancy party, so I exposed her abuse from my childhood. Now my whole family has turned against me, and I've cut ties with my toxic parents off for good. Hi everyone. I, 29F, recently announced my pregnancy, but my mother, 52F, decided to ruin the party with her negativity and made so much fun of me that I said certain things that created a really weird environment. So, my husband and I have been married for almost 3 years, and we had been trying to conceive for about 6 months. It finally happened recently. Both of us are obviously thrilled since this was something that we had wanted for a really long time. He and I decided to throw a party to announce it to our families. We also invited a lot of our friends and coworkers, so pretty much everybody that we knew and was important to us was present at the party. I had also invited my mother in spite of our strained relationship, a decision that I now regret. She has shown me time and again that she doesn't deserve to be around me, but I always tried to keep the peace of the family, and that's why I invited her even though we don't have a good relationship anymore. As a matter of fact, we never had a great relationship to begin with. That was really her own fault, since she had treated me really badly ever since I was a kid. She was pretty much a textbook toxic mother, constantly trying to monitor everything that I ate because she wanted me to be pretty like her. She was a model when she was younger, but she had to quit because of her pregnancy, and I guess that's where it all stemmed from. Her constant obsession with turning me into a miniature version of her and living out her dreams through me. I guess you could refer to her as a combination of an almond mother and a helicopter parent. That's the most accurate description of her. Needless to say, my childhood was not an easy one, and my mother was a nightmare to live with. My dad wasn't at home most of the time because he was the sole breadwinner, and he would work long hours. So, growing up, it was just me and my mother at home. She would make me participate in baby pageants, and the sad part was that I never won a single one. I guess that's what made her even more resentful towards me. The fact that she was trying to live out her dreams through me, but even that wasn't working for her. She kept making me participate in pageants throughout my childhood, even though I never won. My mother has put me on diets from ages as young as 6 years old because she wanted me to have the perfect look and not turn out too chubby when I got older. At the time, I was too young to even understand what was going on with my mother, but by the time I was in middle school, I could tell that there was something very wrong with my mother, and I started rebelling. My mother would pack my lunches, and I would be lucky if I got anything more than half a fruit on most days, so I started eating my friends' lunches as well. I was lucky enough to have good friends who didn't rat me out and gladly shared their lunches with me. I guess their parents also understood that my mother was kind of off, and instead of complaining about me, they started putting extra food in their kids' lunch boxes. That was really nice of them, and that's how I got by in middle school. It was tough, and I hated the fact that I had to count on my friends for something as basic as food, but that's how it was. But in high school, things got easier for me because I received lunch money from my dad. My mother couldn't stop him from giving me money for lunch, but she would threaten me and tell me that if I gained weight, then she would punish me by starving me at home. I honestly thought that she was joking, but unfortunately, she was not. Once I started high school, I started eating more since now I didn't have to rely on my friends for food and could eat to my heart's content. I did gain substantial weight, but I didn't get fat. I just became healthier because I needed that food to fuel myself. I started feeling less lethargic and weak all the time, and my overall health was much better because of the weight gain. My body also started looking normal, and I was really happy about it because I finally looked like how a normal teenager does instead of a stick-thin, malnourished kid. But of course, my mother was horrified and would weigh me almost every day because she had noticed the weight gain before I had, and she did not approve of it. When she realized that I wasn't losing weight in spite of her warnings, she started doing exactly what she had promised me she would. She started starving me at home. She had to give me dinner because my dad would be home at the time, but she forced me to go to school without breakfast and hid all the snacks, so I had nothing to munch on when I was at home. Essentially, the only 2 meals that I was having every day were the school lunch and dinner at home. And even though having lunch at school had helped me gain weight, once it wasn't nutritious enough to sustain that, so I started losing weight rapidly once again. It all came to a head when I actually lost consciousness during class one day and had to be taken to the ER because I just wasn't waking up. That was the day that my father finally found out about everything. Now, a lot of people must be wondering why I hadn't told my father everything right from the beginning. It was obviously because of my mother, and I was really scared of her. Ever since I was a little child, she had practically drilled into my head that if I ever told my dad or anybody else that I was hungry, then she would make sure that I remained hungry for the rest of my life. Saying that I was hungry in my house was pretty much the worst thing that I could say, and I was forbidden from using that word. And obviously, like any little kid, I was terrified of my mother, and I did not want to end up on her bad side, so I never spoke up against her because I was scared of what might happen if I did. And that's what stopped me. And also, maybe a strange little part of myself actually wanted my mother to love me for who I was, and I wanted her approval so bad that I never spoke up against her. My dad was also really busy all the time, and I barely saw him when I was a kid. To my father, there was nothing more important than making money, and he was the kind of dad who would bring the office home with him. He worked really hard, and I am kind of grateful for it since he was the reason that I had a nice life. I was miserable, but I was rich. If he picked up on the fact that I was a lot skinnier than most kids my age, he never said anything about it until the day when I ended up in the ER. Both my parents were called, and while my father seemed to genuinely be concerned about me, my mother just appeared to be really annoyed. I found out later that the doctors had told my parents that my body was lacking proper nutrition, and I had fainted out of hunger. They suggested that either I was actively being starved by someone or I was starving myself. Either way, my mother's cover was blown. When we got back home that day, my dad sat me down and asked me what was going on. My mother was there in the room with us, but for the first time I didn't feel afraid of speaking up for myself. I told my father the truth and said that it was my mother who had been starving me. I also told him that this was not a recent development but had been going on ever since I was a kid, and I couldn't put up with this anymore. I also mentioned that my mother had been trying to get me to participate in pageants all my life, even though I had never been interested in that field. I spilled all the beans and told my dad that she was probably trying to live vicariously through me and wanted me to become a model because that was her dream, but I couldn't handle this anymore, and I was sick of being deprived of something so basic as food. I had a bit of a meltdown because I had been keeping all that to myself for about several years, and now that it was finally all out in the open, I was just too overwhelmed. I started crying, and my dad consoled me for a bit, then sent me up to my room and told me that I could take a nap for a bit or do something to distract myself because I was not going to be allowed to come back into the living room for quite some time. I knew then that my mother was going to hear it, and I decided to clear out and shut myself in my room for the next couple of hours. Up until this day, I don't really know exactly what went down in the next couple of hours following the revelation that my mother had been starving me and that she wanted me to accomplish what she hadn't been able to. All I knew was that I kept hearing muffled screaming and shouting from downstairs, but I knew better than to interfere. My parents got married really young, and they had been together since high school, so I rarely ever heard them fighting, but that one was vicious, and I knew it because my father never lost his temper. He would always try to work things out with my mother calmly when they would have disagreements before, but that was probably their worst fight. When I finally went downstairs after almost 3 hours of being shut in my room, I realized that things were relatively quiet, but my mother was sobbing on the couch, and my dad just sat opposite her with a stone-cold look on his face. When he saw me, he told me that I didn't have to listen to my mother anymore, and neither did I have to fear her. He told me that I could eat whatever I wanted to and that I didn't have to worry about my weight as long as I was healthy. He then handed me some cash and told me to go get some pizza with my friends, which is a luxury that I hadn't been able to afford before because my mother would keep all the cash from me and would never allow me to eat out with my friends in a million years. I was thrilled, and I could tell that my parents needed some more time to sort this out, so I decided to leave them to their own devices and went out with my friends instead. When I came back home, my parents were sleeping in separate rooms, but I didn't have the courage to ask either of them what exactly had happened. I don't know what my dad said to my mother or what exactly they talked about, but what I do know is that after that day, everything changed for the better. My mother stopped monitoring what I ate after that, and that was great. Unfortunately, she also stopped speaking to me at all, and that was kind of awkward because we still lived in the same house. She just didn't speak to me after that unless it was absolutely necessary. My parents didn't get divorced or anything, but they just started sleeping in different rooms and were more distant than they used to be. However, my relationship with my father started improving in the sense that after that incident, I finally had a relationship with my dad. Before that, he was always too busy with work, but then he started making time for me. It was still difficult for me to hold a conversation with him for more than maybe 5 minutes, but it started getting better with time. That incident had taken place when I was in my sophomore year, and by the time I was in my senior year, things at home had improved considerably. My dad and I could finally talk to each other like fathers and daughters usually do. I wouldn't say that my relationship with my mother got better, but at least it didn't get any worse. She would still only speak to me whenever it was absolutely necessary and would try to avoid me otherwise, but I wasn't complaining. I had gone through enough with my mother, and I just wanted things to be peaceful. I had obviously always wondered why my parents didn't separate, but I guess that was their personal choice and I didn't want to question it, so I never brought it up with either of them. I'm addressing this because I know a lot of you guys are going to find it just as weird as I did, but I wanted you to know that I don't have an answer to it. The only person who would probably be able to tell you guys why they stayed together would be my father. But yeah, I don't know why they never got divorced. Anyway, by the time it was time for me to start college, my father and I were doing great, and I was actually pretty upset to be leaving him behind. The day that I left for college, my mother did wish me luck and said goodbye to me. I thought it was kind of strange because for years before that, she had been ignoring me, and that was the first real interaction that we had after I told my father the truth about how my mother would treat me at home. Once I went away to college, I started actively trying to keep in touch with my parents, my mother as well, because in spite of whatever had happened in the past, part of me still wanted to improve our relationship and work on it to fix it. I honestly felt like if we tried, my mother and I would probably be able to make it work. She had a lot of problems, but no person is entirely bad, and even when she was starving me, there would be times that we had a genuine love for each other. Don't get me wrong, what she did was messed up, and I don't think I would ever be able to forgive her for that, but even at that time, there would be great moments between us too, and that is probably why I had so much faith in our relationship. In the years that I was in college, my father and I kept in touch and would talk almost every other day. I tried to rebuild my relationship with my mother, but I wasn't as successful as I had hoped to be. She would barely ever talk to me, and even when she did, it felt like she was not even there or maybe just not interested enough. I kept trying, but I was also busy with assignments and my friends and stuff like that, so after a while, I stopped trying to speak to my mother. I didn't even feel guilty about it because she was the one who never reciprocated my efforts, and it's crazy to think that she was the one who had ruined my childhood, and yet I was the one trying to win her over. Anyway, after I graduated, I decided to move back in with my parents for a couple of months until I had saved up enough to get an apartment of my own. When I returned, things were still the same. My parents were still sleeping in different rooms, and it practically turned into strangers who happened to have a life together. My mother was as quiet and indifferent as ever, and it was just so difficult for me to adapt to such a miserable existence at home after I had spent so much time in college where everyone was happy or at least trying to be happy most of the time. I couldn't take it anymore because I just wanted a normal family, and I would do anything to make it happen. So, a few weeks after I had moved back, I sat my parents down and told them that I couldn't stand this anymore and that I wanted to fix our family. Both of them got really awkward and uncomfortable at that point and refused to even look at me, but I powered through it. I told them that I was really looking forward to having a happy family, something that I had never had, and so I suggested family counseling. I had already been looking into it before I made the suggestion, and I knew that this could really help us. They protested at first, but I talked them into it. My mother was a particularly tough nut to crack, and she seemed very bent on the fact that our family was just fine the way it was and that I didn't have to go out of my way to get therapists and psychology involved here because it was simply not required. But I convinced her and told her that I was ready to put everything in the past and move on. All that I wanted her to do was give our family a chance to make everything right. Took me a while, but she came around eventually and we finally started counseling sessions as a family, and it really did help us. It didn't fix us like I hoped that it would, but it helped us all talk about a lot of things that we had been suppressing. My mother and I especially started talking about a lot of things that we had never thought we would talk about so openly. In therapy, she admitted that she had been trying to force her own ambitions upon me because she felt like she had failed and just wanted to be connected to the modeling world anyhow, even if it had to be through me. I acknowledged that, and I forgave her, and I thought that we were finally getting somewhere. My parents also started couples counseling when they realized that this was actually effective. For the couple of months that I was back at home, everything was great, and even after I moved out when I found my own apartment, things were still okay. I had actually started saying that I would now finally have a normal family, but I guess it was too much to ask for, especially from my mother. She and my father were working things out together in counseling, and they were doing great, but for some reason, she started to sabotage her relationship with me once again, even though she had apologized for her past behavior and had forgiven her. I don't know what she was hoping to gain out of it, but now that I was an adult and she could no longer force me to keep quiet or do things that I didn't want to do, she started resorting to ridiculing me instead. It started off with digs at me about my weight, even though I was at a perfectly healthy weight. Then she started talking about my appearance but tried her best to make it seem like it was coming from a place of concern. I didn't buy it even for 1 second because after spending my entire childhood being monitored by her, I knew that she was trying to do the same thing yet again, but this time she was a lot more careful and cunning about it. I told her quite bluntly that if she was thinking about going back to her old ways and trying to control me again, then she might as well stop coming to therapy with us because then that would just be a waste of time if she wasn't actually intending on bringing about any real change in her behavior. If she only wanted to make amends with me so that she could be a part of my life again to control me, then I didn't want that and we were better off separate. She tried to tell me that it was just coming from a place of concern and habit, but she promised me that she would try and keep her opinions to herself. That was several years ago, and she stayed true to her word, which is why we were able to have a relationship for this long. My parents worked things out and were back to normal after a few years of therapy, and I was actually quite happy for them. Then a couple of years ago, I met my husband through work, and then we started dating. So after that, it went from just being the 3 of us to the 4 of us. My mother would still occasionally make unwelcome remarks about my weight and my appearance, but one look from either me or my dad would fix her, and she would apologize instantly. I would honestly prefer if she didn't say things like that at all, but this was still better than her saying things and not being sorry for it. We were able to have a relationship for this long only because we had been actively trying to be a happy, normal family like any other, and I have to give credit where it's due. My mother really did improve with time, and even if it was just for a few years, at least I did get to experience what a normal family feels like. But then I had my pregnancy announcement party a couple of days ago, and that's where everything went wrong, all thanks to my mother. For some reason, she thought that it would be hilarious to talk about my weight at the party and make it the focal point. When I announced my pregnancy, the first thing that my mother said was that now I finally had an excuse to get fat and eat as much as I wanted to without having to worry about what she would say. She said it in a joking manner and it got a lot of laughs, but I didn't like it. Nevertheless, I sucked it up and decided to smile through it because it was supposed to be a positive day, and I didn't want to let my mother ruin it for me. But my mother didn't stop there and decided to take it further to test my patience. She went on to make a couple of more insensitive jokes about how I would soon be stuffing myself with junk food like I used to and was going to blow up like a balloon. That really got on my nerves, and I don't know if it was the hormones, but I just lost it. So I decided to snap at her and said that it was bold of her to be making jokes at my expense, especially about my weight, given that she was the reason behind all my childhood trauma. That shut her up, and I knew that she was regretting all her mean jokes then. I had never spoken about my mother and her strange obsession with my eating habits outside of my household, and nobody apart from my parents and husband knew about it. But that day, I don't know what got into me, but I just snapped and started talking about it. I was quite hysterical, which I found out later from my husband, and I pretty much exposed my mother. I got so worked up that I accused her of being abusive, which she actually was, so I don't really think I did anything wrong. I had to be taken out of the room, and after my outburst, my mother was humiliated, and my parents left within minutes. I did come back once I had calmed down to talk to my other guests and remedy the situation because it was very unlike me to behave in such a way, but after I had revealed how my mother used to treat me, nobody really seemed to care about my outburst and everybody was just concerned for me, which I really appreciated. The party ended relatively quickly after that, and once everybody had cleared out, my husband told me that there was nothing wrong with the way I had reacted and that he was actually proud of me for standing up for myself and not allowing my mother to walk all over me like she was so used to in the past. I'm glad that my husband is on my side, but unfortunately, my parents are not. Of course, it's no surprise that my mother thinks that she's right and has been crying about it ever since it happened. She claims that she was just joking and that I had no right to humiliate her in front of all our guests like that. I don't understand what was so inherently wrong about what I did because I just exposed her, and at least I was honest. If she can't take it, then she probably shouldn't dish it out. If it was just my mom who thought that I overreacted, I probably wouldn't have given a second thought to it, but my father also believes that I took things way too far and that I owe her an apology. He says that my mother had already apologized, and I had accepted her apologies when we were in therapy together, and I was supposed to let bygones be bygones. So my decision to bring her past treatment up in front of so many people and make her look like the villain when she was actively trying to change and had actually become a much better person now was just low and unacceptable. He told me that she was miserable and hadn't been able to stop crying ever since the party, and this is my dad we are talking about, so I'm bound to take it seriously. I did try to argue with him and tell him that my mother started it with her insensitive jokes, but he told me that maybe the jokes were all right and I was just being too sensitive. I don't really agree with that, but I don't know what to do anymore. IDA for exposing my mother and her past treatment of me at my pregnancy announcement party over a few jokes that she made. Update 1. Hey, thank you so much for all the comments here. My husband and I have decided that we do not owe her or my father any apology and that I was perfectly in the right to expose her. I have put up with a lot and I have graciously let things go from the past, but if she's not willing to respect it, then there's not much that I can do about it. I told my father yesterday that I was not going to be apologizing to my mother, and if anything, she is the one who owes me an apology because she ruined my party and he got really mad at me and told me that I was being overly sensitive. He told me that after my little speech at the party, nobody was willing to interact with them and the family had practically cut them off. I told him that it was not my fault, but he insisted that it was, and it turned into a full-blown argument. So now my father and I are not on talking terms anymore. I don't know how to feel about it, but I am definitely not going to do anything to make things right this time. I tried my best in the past and it worked, even though it was just for a while, but now I have a family of my own to think of, and I'm not going to constantly run after them to make amends, especially when I am not even the one in the wrong in this situation. Update 2. I just realized that my mother has blocked me on all social media. I don't really know how to feel about it, but I'm not even sure that I even care. It's been a week since the party, and she hasn't apologized to me. So now she can do whatever she wants to because it's too late to make things right with me. Blocking me is not going to make me run after her trying to apologize for things that are not my fault. Update 3. So I have decided to block my parents everywhere and cut them off for good. It was an incredibly difficult decision to make, but I have realized that throughout my life, they have been nothing but toxic to me. And it ends now. My dad only ever did the bare minimum for me, but it just isn't going to cut it anymore, and my mom is a whole other story. The reason that they never got divorced is because they wanted to make their marriage work more than they wanted to be good parents, so they could be mad at each other, but I was always going to be the villain to them. It just sucks that my dad was only putting up an act all these years, but deep down he was always going to pick my mother no matter how toxic or evil she was, and my mother would always remain evil and toxic, but they can continue being the way that they are, just away from me. I guess my future is only going to meet one set of grandparents, and I'm happy about it. This ends now. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Parents always favored my spoiled brother, like using my college fund for his car and skipping my wedding for his games, but I found out it was actually a Disney trip, so I've cut them all off. Buckle up, guys, this will be kind of long. So, I, 27F, have a younger brother, Mike, 21M. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him, just overall an a-hole. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born, and my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 50F, especially, she went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50M, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76M, who always called my parents out on their BS and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country, and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent are his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that said money were given to Mike to buy a car. In a house, it's at public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now, both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a, "That's nice." I'm starting to think they didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite, and whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballet shows and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely admitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas' family, and our friends were all there and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip, but once we got back, we discovered that a shitstorm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they'd been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade, to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears, and this seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages. At first insulting and threatening and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state, but my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on three fronts. The majority who is sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. Now for some comments. Comment 1. NTA actions have consequences. Mike is the golden child to the point of things being dysfunctional. You have created your life accordingly, based on what they have done, your mom controlling everything and your dad enabling her, and now they're unhappy because they've been shamed for it. 2. Right. I am, however, pleased your dad might be waking up. Please give a hug or high five to Mr. Grandpa for me, depending on what kind of guy he is, for the star that he is. You go and live your best life where people value you. Also, congratulations to both you and your husband. You've done absolutely nothing wrong. Comment 2. or you invited them, you attempted to remind them several times. They made it very clear that it wasn't a priority to them. Opie, I appreciate your concern. However, I not only invited my parents but also tried to include them in conversations about the wedding several times. My mom made it very clear that it wasn't a priority to her and that brother's event was, as you might be well aware, this is a pattern for them. I can't make people make me a priority. I won't address this again. Thank you for understanding. Comment 3, NTA, you've told them about the wedding. They got an invite which they declined because of your brother's last game, and there's nothing you could have done more. It's on them, just don't react, don't engage. You did good, although I feel sad for you, but I guess this was just the consequences of their decades-long actions. Stop contact and enjoy your married life, and congratulations. Comment 4, NTA. Your mother isn't sorry she missed the wedding. She's sorry that everyone found out she's a terrible mother and was abusive. Ignore her. She made her choice 1,000 times while you were a child. She can face the consequences of all those choices now. Your father you could chose to forgive, but remember he stood by and watched the abuse, the neglect, the financial shenanigans with your college funds. He watched it all and did nothing. He's just as culpable. Ignore anyone who has the nerve to tell you it's your fault your parents missed the wedding they were invited to because they couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the kind of invitation you gave them. You can't fix stupid and you can't fix a narcissist. Live your best life and let them sort their own mess out. Comment 5, NTA. Why are you letting this bother you? Your parents and your brother are finally dealing with the consequences of their actions and their neglect. They've never supported you, and they're just trying to save face for themselves. The damage is done, and they're dealing with the repercussions, so why is it your responsibility to fix things? The broken pieces are shards, and you can never find all of those pieces to put back together. It's not worth the effort. I'm so sorry you continue to be mistreated. You deserve the happiness you've built for yourself, even if that means leaving certain people behind. Your mental health isn't worth it. Congratulations on your nuptials. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. 1. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional, on-paper invites to all my guests and was notified that all invites had reached their addresses. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Luca's side. I did reach out to all of them through message to double-check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left on read. Knowing them and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. 2. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I had already been told there was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and to not be pissy and a bother because some things were simply more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. 3. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest, but surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt, the FB post one, but sometimes mom was on the phone and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention when I talked about it during reunions. She smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. 4. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I try to go and see in the past years, I've been harassed. I tried after my HS, bachelor's, and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up, for reasons involving my brother. Every time I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that all those times Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going and see, and how that I have him here I feel more confident in my stance, but before that I wasn't this confident. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once at 14. My aunts, uncles, and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry, and then once home, I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, I kept in contact regularly with my paternal side but admitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which TBH still haunts me to this day. Only Grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. 5. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour's drive from my parents, in a small town, and they don't know my new address because once, my brother tried to break in my apartment to steal some cash, and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. 6. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money of my fund right away. They just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later. In the meantime, update. First of all, I want to thank all those who were interested in my story and those who wished me and my husband a happy life. I am beyond grateful for your reassuring messages and your love and feedback. The response was overwhelming and beyond what I ever thought it could be. I love you all so much. To those who believed my story was fake, I want to say that I'm happy your family life is better than mine, to the point of thinking of my reality as a fantasy, but I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me and DM claiming that I'm writing a fake story for attention. If I've missed a few details in the OG post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out because of my family's harassment. You are not forced to read my story or think it's true, but I think keeping the smallest amount of decency would be nice. Oh, and before diving in the update, let me clarify a few things. 1. Yes, the invitation specifically stated it was a wedding, no excuses. 2. My maternal side of the family didn't come to the wedding. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear in the OG post. Most of them were busy, and the others just gave me excuses to send a gift but not come. That's it. Don't ask me why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mom. It's not like I live in their brain. 3. My mother's atonement is the fact that she apologized via text. Now on to the update. Things have been a little crazy this past week. I got off of Reddit for a couple of days to gather my thoughts. Then I had a lengthy conversation with Lucas about how to proceed. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could ever love him more than I already do. My parents were always a taboo topic, but he hit me with a brutal reality check that I absolutely needed. We reached the conclusion that the fact I kept in contact all this time, stuck around, and couldn't go and see isn't healthy. I've realized that the reason I never fully went and see was that, deep down, I just wanted their approval, even now. For once, pathetic, I know, but it's like a drug being with my parents. They can be loving, funny, caring, and warm, until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave for more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But that's enough. I promised myself that things are going to change. I've thought about it and decided to start therapy and to go with all those who made an issue about this situation, for good this time. After the days dedicated to reflecting on how I feel, I ended up messaging my father to tell him that if he wanted to talk, I would meet him, Mom, and Mike in a neutral location the following day. He immediately replied and agreed, and we met at the park. My father's sisters and brother accompanied us for damage control. My father looked distraught and as if he had been crying for a while. My mom looked the same, but I think it was more out of anger and embarrassment. My brother looked annoyed. I told the three of them about how their behavior and preference in regards of my brother always hurt me, and that their abusive behavior made me realize that I didn't want contact with any of them again. After that meeting, my mother tried to cut me off multiple times, but my aunt, the one who posted on FB, shut her up every single time. When I asked them why would they treat me this way, they didn't know what to say. My father kept crying and apologizing without giving me an answer, and my uncle reprimanded him for it. My mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time, but well, in the end, she just said that she simply disliked me, plain and simple. And my brother, he just liked the attention and making me miserable as some kind of sport. I went on with my questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invite, they claimed to have never received one. I showed them the texts, but they denied receiving them, and well, it turns out that they hadn't, in fact, received my wedding invitation. When it arrived to their house, they weren't there. The only one in the house was my brother, who had come visiting for the weekend. He saw the invite and, as many of you guessed, ripped it up and trashed it. And then, when I texted my parents, he deleted the messages. Wasn't hard to do. According to him, they kept my chat archived and didn't get the notification. So, my parents never actually got a formal invitation. I was just distraught. I asked Mike why would he do that, and he just shrugged and claimed that it wasn't as important as the stuff they had in program anyway. I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Strangely enough, my parents were upset and started reprimanding him. He actually began to throw a tantrum and cry crocodile tears, and I must admit that I was kind of satisfied. But then my mom claimed that all was resolved. There was no need to fuss over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear their name. That set me off, and I interrupted her, telling her that they weren't forgiven at all, that just because Mike trashed the invite, it didn't mean it automatically canceled all their neglect out. Plus, all that time, it was still very obvious that I was having a wedding, and they should have asked about it. You want to know my mother's response? She said something along the lines of, "I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios." She was convinced Lucas didn't actually like me nor would ever marry me. When I tell you I was about to trash her face, do you believe me? Another thing came up. It turns out that my brother didn't have a football game to go to at all. My parents used the fact that my husband, friends, and I know little to nothing about football, we prefer soccer, and the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school to make up a story to avoid my event. At the time I wrote the OG post, I couldn't confirm or deny the presence of a game because my brother has private social media, and Lucas and I are blocked, and I foolishly trusted my parents' word. But no, you want to know where they went with that man-child? They went to Disneyland because Mike wanted to go. They edited the football story to cover for my brother's 100th tantrum holiday, and apparently, they did it multiple times in the past months. At that point, I was just completely burned out and overwhelmed by this amount of informations, the fact that I had been fooled this badly, that I was so guilty genuinely made my blood boil, and I snapped. I stood up and told my father he was a sad, weak man, unable to stand up for his kids unless his wife approved of it. I told my brother he was a little shit, a poor excuse of a man that will not accomplish anything in his life, and that he'll always live like the leech he is, baby to the point of sexlessness. And to my mom, I told her that she was the worst, narcissist, pathetic little woman on the earth, that she didn't even deserve to be addressed and judged for her irrelevance, that not even God could help her out because she is just too rotten. Harsh, I know. My mother shot up from her seat to scream at me halfway through my rant to her, but I was just too mad. I shouted at her to shut the hell up and sit down and listen for once. She got so mad. It felt like steam was coming out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking and talking. It felt as if all my anger and hurt just flooded out. At one point, I'm pretty sure the whole park was silent. I spat at my parents and Mike that I was dissing them all and that if they're smart, they'll think before reaching out again. I took my purse and left with Lucas, Anna, and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at my aunt's and uncle's mercy. I think at some point, the reality of what I had just learned and said finally hit me because I ended up having a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me through it until we stopped in a parking lot to calm me down. I am beyond grateful for their help. Once home, I just fell on the bed and went to sleep. I really wanted to go with you guys' advice and post the whole thread on FB, but given my work and career, I couldn't expose myself like that. One thing is sharing my story from an anonymous throwaway on Reddit. The other is on FB, with my name and face plastered everywhere. I couldn't go down that path. Instead, I did something better. I made a folder with all of my mother's insults, messages, and awful comments and sent it to the woman in charge of my mom's church. It's a tight-knit community my mom worked her ass off to enter in, but that was also extremely judgmental, and being shunned by them is a death sentence, and well, that's exactly what happened. Just like clockwork, the scandal spread like wildfire, going out of the church and reaching the rest of the small town. You can imagine what this means for my mother and father because of my little spill. I did find other messages from my maternal side of the family, belittling me even more for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I just didn't care anymore at that point, so I followed you guys' advice and told them that, from now on, they will no longer be part of my life and that they can talk shit all they want, I just won't care. Instead, they should be grateful I don't send their nasty texts to their employers and spouses. I blocked every single one of them, grandparents included, on everything. I did find a lengthy message from my father. He apologized for not being strong enough to face my mother, agreed that what I said was true, and couldn't believe that he had lost so much of my life because of her. He told me he is going to divorce her no matter what my decision will be, because he is tired of being controlled. He would like a relationship with me to make up for all the years that passed. I did reply to him to tell him that as of now, I really don't want to see him or forgive him. He has replied that he'll try his best to win me back and that he loves me. I replied back that as of now, I find that hard to believe, and then blocked him too. Frankly, his slimy way of trying to have an out from this situation by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least she was hateful and owned up to it. He is only able to blame others for his choices. I don't want to surround myself with people like that. My mother and brother are blocked, similarly to my maternal side. Mike wrote other messages to taunt and insult me, and I just blocked him. My mom threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her marriage going into shambles, and I just replied good riddance before blocking her too. As for my grandpa, he has decided to stay with us for a while to stick by my side. He really is the best and has read some of your comments. He isn't going to admit that he's flattered by them. Since then, a few days have passed, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon. I know this isn't the drama-filled, revengeful update you hoped for, but well, this is it. I'll let you know if anything changes or evolves. Thank you so much for the love and support you showed me. I think I'm gonna log out now. As for now, goodbye. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Husband's emotional support for my best friend turned into a full-blown affair. She confessed everything, including their plans to take my baby, and now I'm fighting for custody. Throw away because my husband stalks Reddit. Also, I know he isn't cheating on me. He's at home more often than not, and I have full access to his electronics, as does he to mine. My husband, 26M, and I, 26F, have been together since we were young teenagers. We got married last year and have a 6-month-old daughter together. She is the light of both our lives, as we both came from broken homes and want a better life than we lived growing up. My best friend came a few years later. We used to live in the same neighborhood and casually began to hang out. She lives with both her parents and siblings, as she is studying to get her bachelor's degree. At first, she didn't like my husband, said that he was clingy, and tried to insert himself into our friendship. WTF? She was civil to him because he was my romantic partner. For context, my husband is bipolar type 2, autism, and PTSD, and it causes him to be a little socially awkward and miss certain social cues and taboos. I love him regardless of it all. Over the last few years, we have been hanging out a lot more. She comes over for a few drinks, we go to movies, and even visit local attractions together. We all three have a good time, and my husband does try to make nights for just the two of us often. However, last year, my husband and I found out we were expecting a child together. In January, I was working and fell because at the time I was working a fast food place. I threw up and went to the doctor. Come to find out, I was 8.5 weeks pregnant. My life changed, and I had become more busy to get myself ready for motherhood. My best friend saw me less and less, and we couldn't talk as much. My husband and I got married almost a month and a half after discovering we were going to become parents. That's when our dynamic changed. Recently, I applied to school and am currently in college trying to get a law degree so I can become a paralegal and get to law school. I'm also a stay-at-home mom while doing college too. I've been super busy. One day, my husband gets a text, and it's from my best friend. She asks if they can talk, as she was upset. He took the phone call, with me protesting, and a few minutes later said, "Sandra, fake name. We need to go get Carla, fake name. Her father is picking a fight with her." I get upset, as we were watching a movie together, and I had just gotten the baby down for bed. We go to her house, which is about 20 minutes away, and she stays with us for a night. As I get our daughter back down to bed, Carla asks to cuddle with the two of us in our bed. I was hesitant. I have issues with claustrophobia due to a traumatic experience as a child. My husband gave the go-ahead. We settle in for the night. Carla's dad apologized, and she heads back home. Once she was gone, I blew up on my husband. What he did was not only inappropriate but was disrespectful to my boundaries. Ever since, when she has an issue with her dad, she calls my husband and vents. One day, while my in-laws were staying with us, my Amiel overheard a convo with my hubby and Carla. She was concerned and asked me if I was okay with it. I said, no, not really. But every time I bring it up, he gets defensive, saying that she needs help, that she is going through a hard time, blah, blah, blah. It is important to note that my Mil was cheated on in the past by her ex, my husband H's father. We are also extremely close, and she sees me as a daughter. She hates cheaters with a passion, and my husband, who I will refer to as James, was using the same excuses his father did. She asked to speak to him privately and walked to our living room. They got into a heated match and James apologized to me. He said he didn't know that it was hurting me and causing issues in our marriage. I asked him how would he feel if I had asked him if another man could sleep in the bed with us. He kind of deflated and tried to say it's different, blah blah, blah. His stepfather, Mark, fake name, spoke up and said it is the same. You're uncomfortable with it, so is she. Quit with the excuses. James respects Mark quite a lot. Actually, Mark raised him since he was 8, and his own father was in and out of the picture. Once the dust settles, my husband truly apologized to me for his actions and said that he would do better. I kissed him and that was that. However, I wouldn't be right here if that was the end of the issues. Lately, Carla has been calling him 3 to 8 times a day. She says it's because she is bored and has no one else to talk to. I snap. I call him out over the nonchalant about the situation, how when she calls, he answers, how it is making me feel like a third wheel in my marriage, etc. His response, she's just lonely. You're letting it get to you. That night, I slept in the living room. I'm starting to suspect that she is trying to monopolize his time. She calls him for over an hour each time he calls. They talk. She complains about her life, etc., almost like she is his girlfriend or something. I am starting to find this relationship troubling. It's getting to the point that it is affecting my marriage. Where do I go from here? Any advice would be appreciated. Edit. Thanks, everyone, for the feedback. I'm going to have a talk with him with his mom involved. He won't listen to me if I don't. I'm tired of fighting him over this. I should have an update with a resolution in a couple of days. I'm going to read everyone's responses more thoroughly. Thanks for the advice. Edit 2. My husband and I had a sit-down talk. His mother and stepfather weren't available. He promised me that he would explain everything in detail. I called Carla, and she said that we could talk Friday when she wasn't busy with school. She had something she needed to out. I will have an update on Friday, hopefully. Edit 3. I woke up to a text from Carla this morning. She actually wants to talk to me tonight alone, as her schedule has changed. We are going to have a heart-to-heart. Hopefully I will have some news. Edit 4. I need some time. I will post an update later on. My heart is hurting. Hubby and I are getting a divorce. Thank you for understanding, everybody. Now for some comments. Comment 1. You've set your boundaries, and he continues to cross them. Is this how you want your marriage to be? She won't stop as long as your husband responds to her every time. You're right. I have issues standing up for myself. Comment 2. You're standing up for yourself. Your husband is not respecting you. You need to be open with your husband and tell him that his behavior is leading to the end of this relationship. If he tries that she's lonely and you're just jealous, you answer that she's lonely because she prefers to seek the attention of her husband's best friend, and you're jealous because he's given more importance to another woman's comfort over yours, his wife and mother of his children. Him being autistic is not an excuse here. He has difficulty with social clues, not with knowing what is right or wrong. It's not unknown to a person in a committed relationship to develop a crush on someone. What they do about that crush is what matters. Your husband, instead of cutting her off his life and putting effort into the marriage, is letting his feelings for her grow and become an emotional affair. Comment 3. He needs to cut her off. You both do. He needs to tell her that their contact is hurting his marriage, so it's best they not have contact and then block her. He's choosing her over you again and again, every single time. Sounds like he is enjoying the attention. He likes being needed by her, by being her hero. If he doesn't stop contact, the relationship is going to be over. He's in an emotional affair with her. Next step is physical. It's unfortunate, but it's ultimatum time. It's either you or her. He can't have both and maintain a healthy marriage. Comment 4. He needs to tell her that their contact is hurting his marriage. Not even that. He needs to tell her he can't be the first and only person she turns to whenever she's got a problem. If she's really having this much trouble navigating life without blowing up his phone constantly, she needs a therapist. If she's just doing it because she can, she knows that's not okay. Either way, it has to stop, and he's not making himself available if she doesn't knock it off on her own. Taco Strong. Either your husband takes the steering wheel and cuts her off and respects your marriage, or you leave them both behind. Your husband is allowing this and, I guarantee, is enjoying it. He has you locked in marriage, and now he has the thrill of speaking almost non-stop to another woman. He's literally emotionally cheating on you, and you know what the next step is. Again, this isn't about her anymore but about your husband. He either gets with the program or he doesn't. Update 1. This update is hard. Everything about this situation sucks, and I don't know if I will be okay for some time. Baby and I are currently staying with my friend Tanya. To start, James and I are getting a divorce. Carla is no longer a friend to me or our mutuals. The betrayal is too deep for her to be friends with our group. As most of you assumed, James and Carla are indeed having an affair. Started about 3 months ago and just turned physical 1 month ago. They were planning on just up and leaving after James served me divorce papers. They used the ruse that he was helping her through emotional issues to hide the fact. I was crushed. She wanted to clear the air before it got worse. That was when she dropped a huge bombshell. James was going to try and get me to terminate my rights to my child in order for Carla to adopt her. The reason? My borderline diagnosis a few years ago made me unfit to be a mother, and he was sure that the courts would agree. She then handed me 2 separate stacks of paperwork and left. I am contacting a lawyer as I am writing this. I was seriously hurt. You guys were right. Carla was a snake and only told me this so she wouldn't feel guilty. However, I am not letting my soon-to-be ex-husband bully me into termination of my rights. I called him afterwards and got very heated about what was going on. James just sat there in silence. I was crying afterwards. I pleaded with him to tell me what I did wrong. For a little bit of backstory, I had a near-fatal complication with my delivery of our daughter where I bled my entire labor. I had to have 2 blood transfusions and haven't fully recovered from it. I was not cleared for any extraneous activity for 3 months, including sexual activity. James was getting unsatisfied with all my doctor's appointments and not getting the sex that he wanted. I was hurting and ended up needing another procedure to remove some placenta that didn't naturally come out. I had to have my tubes tied because if I have another child, it will kill me next time. James wanted at least 2 more kids, and this put an end to his plans. I married a monster. We were together since we were 15, and this is how he repays me. I thought I knew him. He was acting so caring and nice to me. I am absolutely heartbroken. I'm not even sure if I'm going to update this anymore, but if I do, it'll be after the divorce settles. Thanks for all your concern. I'm going to step back and take some time to adjust. There is no chance for a healthy co-parenting situation. I'm fighting for primary custody with supervised visits. Carla will not have any access to baby, as I will ask the judge to make a clause preventing her from interacting with my daughter. Thanks for all the advice. Edit. I forgot to add that I contacted his mother and Mark this morning. They are furious that James is doing this to me. They are helping me foot the cost of a lawyer because I'm a stay-at-home mom and college student. They have kicked James out, and he is now staying at our old house with Carla. He did give me the courtesy to get my stuff and didn't put up a fuss about me taking what I wanted. He told me that he will keep in contact for divorce proceedings. Update 2, Bestie and Husband. Sorry I've been radio silent. I spoke to a lawyer who was helping me at a reduced rate. My in-laws are helping me foot the cost of a lawyer against their wayward son. With all the info that I have, including some threatening texts from Carla and James, I have decided to file for a protection order. They were even stupid enough to send me a text that pretty much confirmed the blackmail. I intend to use this to my advantage in the upcoming divorce proceedings as evidence of emotional abuse. James has continued to maintain that I need to terminate my rights to our daughter so that he can run away with Carla, but I shut that down. My little girl is the light of my life and my only chance to be a mom, which is something I've always wanted to do. I finally got a clean bill of health from my doctor after months of dealing with postnatal complications. Needless to say, no more babies for me. I could die if I get pregnant again. I go to court Friday for our divorce proceedings. We have a mediator that my lawyer is speaking to directly for me, so I don't have to deal with James's bully tactics. My lawyer is a no-nonsense kind of man, and I like that about him. My in-laws have decided to cut ties with James after this. He openly disrespected them for giving me a place to stay after I was kicked from the house, and the threats, the emotional anguish he has been putting me through has been too much. They've always saw me as their own daughter and has treated me as such. They are just as angry at James for his involvement and all this as I am. That's why they decided to foot the cost of a lawyer since I was a stay-at-home mom. My therapist has upped my therapy sessions to 3 times a week. I was also formally diagnosed with DID recently, which only came out when I blacked out on a therapy session. My therapist and psychiatrist have been communicating and have suspected for a while that I have it but got confirmed after my recent development in therapy. I haven't told James this and never intend to. My MAL does know and has been my rock through all of this. As for the commenters on RA that say that I moved too quickly out of the house for it to seem real, I have one thing to say. I have very little and had to go back and grab the baby stuff. My STBX and Carla have went on a weekend getaway to my dream location, which I knew they did to hurt me even more. The pics were sent to me by my current friend who gave me a place for a few days before my in-laws gave me a place in their home. Baby girl is adjusting to life without her daddy around all the time. She is super fussy most of the time, and I am sure she misses having him around. It breaks my heart to pieces. That's all that I have for you right now. I will have another full update on Friday. Update 3. I have some great news. Baby girl is safe with me. My lawyer pulled through for me, and my ex wants this divorce to be over with as soon as possible. First of all, I got full custody of my daughter with supervised visitation from ex. His own words came back to haunt him. I had proof of all his threats and the blackmail of him trying to get me to sign away my rights, and the judge wasn't happy. He tore into James and Carla about their behavior and how they tried to blackmail me and how they were lucky that I didn't press charges for extortion. Because of their bad behavior, he told them that he couldn't, in conscience, do shared custody because of the evidence of their behavior towards me. He was also worried that they would try to run off with her. Next up, because of all the behavior and aggression towards me that was unwarranted, my protection order was granted. My MIL, who stayed beside me in court, is the one who volunteered to facilitate the supervised visits until my divorce becomes final. If Carla and James try to contact me again, unless it is strictly about our daughter, then they both will go to jail. James has to pay me child support. Of course, he tried to protest it, but it wasn't happening. Lastly, after court, James said something that kind of broke my heart about our daughter. If he can't have primary custody, then he is going to petition to terminate his rights. He doesn't want to be tied to me anymore and is willing to let my daughter suffer for it. So, my daughter just pretty much lost her father because he would rather break away from me and pretend that I don't exist. I have some additional information from Carla that she said to me afterwards. Apparently, she is infertile due to an illness she suffered from as a teenager. She wanted a baby so bad and to get me out of the picture so that they could play happy family with my daughter. I was stunned. She then asked me if I was happy for tearing their family apart. I had to look at her for a second. She tore my family apart. I wanted to slap her so bad. Because of her, my daughter is probably going to lose her father. I'm sad. That's all that I have for you. My next update will probably be when the divorce finally happens. Thanks for reading this. Update 4. This update is heavy. Court was on Friday, and I was waiting for the dust to settle before I posted. 2 days ago, my STBX husband has been hospitalized. Carla called me this morning crying. Despite the order, James tried to commit suicide this morning, and she found him just in time. He tried to OD on his prescriptions, and now he is in the hospital. The doctors don't know how long he will be there, but I will keep my hopes up for a speedy recovery. Despite the literal hell he has put me through, he is still the father of my daughter. I'm not pressing charges this time against Carla because it was a dire emergency. James is stable, and they are transferring him to another facility for the foreseeable future. I feel almost sorry for her. I don't know when I will be able to update again. I have a lot to deal with and emergency care to plan for. Please keep me in your thoughts as I navigate this difficult situation. Thank you. Edit. STBX is at a treatment facility that specializes in autism and emotional regulation disorders. He will be there for at least 30 days, depending on treatment and his receptiveness of it all. Divorce proceedings have to be put on hold for a bit until he gets out. I talked to my lawyer about Carla contacting me about his attempt. He told me that I shouldn't have responded, but he understood the necessity to do so. For now, I'm not in contact with her and don't intend to be so for the foreseeable future. Update 5. I didn't think I'd be back with an update, but it has been 2 weeks since STBXH was hospitalized for a suicide attempt. Since we have put divorce proceedings on hold for a while until he gets out of the hospital, I've been taking the steps to spend time with my daughter and my in-laws, who have been my rocks in this situation. Life has stabilized for me for a bit. I'm still acclimating to my DID diagnosis. I've been out of it for a few days now due to some heavy-duty painkillers. But I know some of you are here to see how this saga ends. On to the biggest part of the update. Carla has been arrested and is being charged with breaking a protective order, aggravated assault, and attempted kidnapping, plus a whole slew of other charges. Here's what happened. I was out and about in town yesterday trying to get a few errands done. I was starting to get hungry and decided to get some food at my favorite spot. It was a small Italian restaurant that I used to go to with my husband before the divorce proceedings started. I ordered my food and sat down to wait for my order. As my food was being handed to me, I saw Carla storm in like she owned the place and decided to confront me. She was hysterical, and I couldn't make sense of what she was trying to say. She then started to punch and kick me. To make a long story short, Carla broke my nose and arm, fractured my left eye socket, and punctured a lung. When she realized what she had done, she panicked and tried to take my stroller while I was fighting to stay conscious. Someone saw what she was trying to do and stopped her before she could escape. I woke to police in my room and my in-laws holding my daughter. The police filled me in on what happened, and now Carla is in jail awaiting a court hearing. Because of the nature of my injuries, police are taking the decision to press charges out of my hands. Not that I'd try to drop the charges anyway. So yeah, this is where I am at. Sorry if it seems super lame. I will update again after Carla's court date in a few days. Much love, guys. Carla is still sitting in jail. She is facing some serious prison time, and I'm so happy that I can put her behind me. I also got out of the hospital a day and a half ago. First of all, let me begin with a small update on STBX hubby. He has been receptive to treatment and will be leaving the hospital next Monday. My email has been keeping me up to date on his condition, and he is stable now. A lot of you were right. Carla took advantage of his manic episode and need for a stronger dosage of his medicine by convincing him to sleep with her. He has since broken up with her and begged his mother to tell me that he does want another chance to be my husband. That's why she attacked me the other day. She couldn't handle his rejection. To be clear, I'm not giving him another chance. He destroyed my trust by not only cheating on me but by refusing his medicines for a while and threatening me and our daughter. I'm still going through with the divorce, but I may go to counseling to review the custody arrangement and give him more supervised visitation. He's still her father, after all. Also, I got a job recently. I was told I got the position the day before I was released from the hospital. I haven't read all of your messages of support, but the ones that I have read, thank you. Carla is still in jail with no chance to get out before her next hearing. Hopefully, she gets what is coming to her. Hubby is stabilizing and begging for another chance, and I'm looking forward to starting my career. I will be updating again in about a week. Edit. I just read the comments, and some of them are rather harsh about me saying I want to try to give him a little more supervised visits. Say what you want, but STBXH can go back and try to get the custody order reviewed when he gets out. As long as he is stable and undergoes mandated therapy, The judges here will rule in his favor. The review of his custody arrangement is per my lawyer's advice. Otherwise, when he gets better, he can file to have it amended. It's just easier to be agreeable rather than fight it out. I have no more energy to do so. Carla is in jail, so my biggest threat is gone. She isn't getting out for some time. Not even her family's influence can help her. I'd rather agree to longer visits than risk having him gain even an ounce of unsupervised custody. At least this way, I know my in-laws will get her out of there if he is dangerous. It will also look better on me during this divorce process. Update 6. STBXH just got out of the hospital. He is staying at his home alone. He is so miserable now that he has lost everything. His mom and stepdad have cut him off for the most part, except during visits with our daughter. His mom told me that he is going to sign away his rights once I get married again if that is what I want. According to her, he wants to reconcile but knows that I am not willing to do so. He wants his life back before this whole Carla debacle started. He isn't fighting custody at all either. He doesn't want any more visitation than he already has. He is willing to pay child support and alimony to speed along this divorce. He is cognizant of the damage he has done to our family. For context, my mother cheated on my father, and it broke up my family before I was old enough to remember. Their divorce was final when I was only a year old, and my mother abandoned me. I cannot stand cheaters. They destroy lives. James understands this too. Cheating is that hard line for me, so James knew he messed up. Right now, I have an appointment Friday for a discussion with my lawyer about the terms of our divorce and formalizing custody. James's parents are helping me with arrangements for my own apartment. Thank you, everyone. I won't update again until the divorce is final, which should be in 3 months at least. Goodbye for now. Now on to the next story. Story 9. Toxic MIL and husband's ex crashed our anniversary party to say he married the wrong woman. I finally snapped, called MIL crazy, told off ex and Phil husband, blamed me and now isn't speaking to me. Hi, I'm using a throwaway account because I have a lot of people added to my main account. So, I'm in a bit of a pickle right now because of something that happened a few days ago, and my husband has stopped speaking to me because of what I said. For context, my husband, I'll refer to him as Frank, and I have been married for 3 years. He's 33 and I'm 30. We dated for 2 years before that. This is my first marriage, but my husband has been married before. Interestingly enough, his ex-wife is still a part of his life because my mother-in-law is pretty much a demonic creature and hates me because she thinks that I'm the one who took away her son from her dear little daughter-in-law, or maybe I should say ex-daughter-in-law, which is something that she is still mad about. My husband's ex-wife, we will refer to her as Sandra, was his high school sweetheart. She moved in next door with her family when he was in high school, and since they spent a lot of time together, they ended up falling in love. They dated for a couple of years, and after both of them had graduated from college, they decided to get married. They had even attended the same college because they couldn't bear the thought of being apart. After they got married, they had 1 good year before things started falling apart for them. Sandra had chosen to be a stay-at-home wife, but unfortunately, Frank had just started working and he wasn't earning enough to support both of them and pay all the bills. But Sandra was determined to be a stay-at-home wife because she thought that it was a better lifestyle for her. The problem was that there wasn't much to do around the house. So Frank would tell her that she was just wasting her time and his money, so she needed to start looking for a job. That's how the fighting started, and then instead of trying to fix things between them, my mother-in-law, let's call her Karen, decided to make things even worse for him. She planted the idea that having a baby would solve all their problems in Sandra's head, and that stupid woman actually believed her. She started insisting that they have a child so that it would solve all their problems and they could return to their state of marital bliss. But of course, Frank, like any other normal person, was against that idea because, for starters, they barely had enough money to cover their own expenses. A child would just make matters worse for them financially. They could simply not afford to have a kid at that time. And secondly, he was still relatively young and hadn't even hit 25 yet. He hadn't thought about having kids before that age because, let alone financially, he wasn't even mentally or emotionally prepared to have a baby. But since Karen had already planted that idea in Sandra's head, there was no taking it back. She became obsessed with the idea of having a child, and she started accusing Frank of not loving her enough to have a baby with her because he didn't agree with her idea. Things only got worse beyond that point, and eventually, Frank just cracked under pressure and filed for a divorce one day. They had already been fighting that week, and he said that he just couldn't take it anymore. So getting a divorce was the only solution. After that, it was the usual. There was a lot of drama, and Karen was fully on Sandra's side. A lot of meaningless and false accusations were thrown around where people were implying that maybe Frank had been having an affair and was simply trying to hide it. It was really hurtful because most of it came from his own mother, but eventually, they were able to work past their differences and continue to remain on good terms. Sandra also calmed down considerably after the divorce had been filed, and a lot of tears were shared, and she promised to change into a better woman for him eventually. But they did go through with the divorce because Frank wanted to give himself a real shot at being happy. So he continued to live in the apartment that he had been staying in, and Sandra moved back in with her parents. Sandra and Karen continued to remain on good terms and somehow got even closer after the divorce because they lived in close proximity and would meet and talk to each other almost every day while Frank continued to work on himself. And eventually, he landed a job in the company that I was working in. By the time I met him, he had already been divorced for a couple of years. I met Frank for the first time on his first day of work, and that would be around 2.5 years ago. He sat at the desk opposite to mine, and we weren't friends for the first few months, but then he struck up a conversation with me one day, and we ended up becoming really good friends. Then he asked me out, and I said yes. Since then, we have been together, and things were smooth sailing at first. I always knew for a fact that his mother was never going to like me. He had told me that she had some weird unresolved issues and had told me how she treated Sandra better than she treated him, which was weird given that he was her biological son and she was just her daughter-in-law. He had told me everything about his first marriage and how it fell apart, and I empathized with him. I thought that it was really sad, and even before I had met his mother, I prepared myself mentally, and I knew that she was not going to like me because she was apparently still holding out hope that Frank would go back to Sandra, and I was standing in the way of that, at least that's what she thought. So I had no expectations the first time that I met my husband's family. His father and his sister were relatively nice, but just like I had expected, Karen was cold, and she didn't even try to hide the fact that she wasn't on board with this relationship, even though Frank had taken his time and hadn't introduced me to his family until we had completed almost 10 months of our relationship. His mother had known that he was dating me, but even then, when she met me, she made it very clear that I would never be welcome in the family. And to be very honest, I didn't really care for it. As long as Frank was on my side, I didn't care what his mother thought of me, especially given the fact that I knew and was aware of her weird equation with her ex-daughter-in-law. I thought being in a position where she didn't like me would be still better than being the second Sandra or whatever. So anyway, I knew about his first marriage and his mother's relationship with Sandra. I had also known about how in love the two of them had been in the initial stages of their relationship. I didn't think that at any point they could do anything to shock me even further. But then after the first time that my husband introduced me to his family and brought me home, Sandra and Karen decided to team up against me. So after that, every family event that I would attend as Frank's girlfriend, Karen would make sure to invite Sandra because she was part of the family. I knew that they were just trying to get into my head and were waiting to see how long I waited before I cracked and threw a fit about Sandra being present at the family parties and gatherings, but little did they know that I had already prepared myself for this, and I wasn't going to let it bother me. As long as they were not actively getting in my way, I didn't care. I knew that they were trying to play mind games with me, but I wanted to let them know that I wasn't the kind of woman that they could just intimidate and get rid of. So for the years that I was dating Frank, Sandra would be present everywhere, and he and I would just ignore her and would even laugh about it once we got home because we knew that this was not the reaction that either of them had expected. This went on until we got married, and neither of them ever had the courage to actually come up to me and say anything. They would just stand in corners and lurk while shooting nasty looks at me and Frank just because we were not playing into their hands and giving them the reaction or the outburst that they wanted. Then Frank and I got engaged, and even after that, things were pretty great for us. It only started getting bad once we actually got married. Of course, Sandra was not invited to either the engagement party or the wedding because Karen was not in charge of the guest list there. But after marriage, most of the events and holidays were held at Karen's house. Be it Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthdays and anniversaries, Sandra was always invited. After our marriage, however, instead of just glaring at us from a distance, they started actively picking on me. It started off small and insignificant. They would just maybe make a remark or make some backhanded compliment about something that I was wearing or the way that I had done my makeup, and then they would erupt into giggles like a bunch of high school girls. That was pretty easy to ignore because it really didn't make a difference to me if they didn't like the way that I dressed or the way that I did my makeup. Their opinions on anything didn't matter to me, so it was very easy for me to ignore them at first. But then they started getting bolder with their insults. They would say things to imply that maybe Frank had made a mistake by marrying me because now he would have to get used to doing household work on his own because I would never have the time. I had been promoted over Frank a couple of months ago, and that's what they were making fun of, trying to emasculate my husband, saying things like they knew that I wore the pants in the family. It was orthodox and narrow-minded of them, but I didn't expect any better from them either. They would also say certain things like Frank had screwed up by letting go of Sandra because at least she would have made sure that they had a family of their own by the time he was in his mid-30s, but unfortunately, I would never be able to give him that because apparently I was too old to have kids now. Honestly, I don't even think that's true because I've heard of plenty of women who have successfully and easily given birth after 30 and sometimes even after 35. They would bully me for the strangest things, and even though I would try really hard not to let their words get under my skin, it was becoming more and more difficult to let things slide since they were getting worse. Not only were they making fun of my appearance, but they would also mock things that were out of my control as well, like me getting promoted over Frank and the way that I had not been raised well enough to know anything about being a good wife and that Frank had really lost by letting go of Sandra. They would say all this right to my face, and Frank never said anything about it. Earlier, when Karen would invite Sandra to all the family events, it would never bother me because they would never actually say anything, and I knew that whatever games they were trying to play with us, we were winning it. So before we got married, it had never bothered me, and for a couple of months even post-marriage, it didn't get under my skin the way it used to after that. But after one point, it was just too much to take, and I had reached a saturation point with all of this. So last year, towards the end of the year, after we had our Christmas dinner at Karen's house, I decided to have a talk with Frank regarding his mother's behavior. I knew that the way Sandra behaved was out of his control, so there was no point in talking to him about that, and I didn't even blame him for it. But the one thing that he could do was talk to his mother and tell her that he didn't appreciate the way that the two of them were treating me. I knew that cutting her off was not going to be possible because cutting her out of our lives would mean that he would never be able to visit his father again, and his dad was a nice man, but due to unfortunate circumstances, he was wheelchair-bound and he needed Karen to take care of him full-time. We could move him in with us, and we had even suggested that a couple of times, but his father preferred to stay with Karen for obvious reasons. She might not be a great mother, but she was a good wife, so cutting Karen off was not even on the table. The only thing that I could expect Frank to do was promise me that he would talk to her and tell her to lay off me. Last Christmas, Karen and Sandra had given me an especially hard time and had been pretty much at their worst. They had made a lot of comments about our marriage, which was apparently doomed to failure according to them, and had been making several distasteful jokes about how I'd better hold on to Frank if I didn't want him to go back to Sandra. It had made everybody at the table uncomfortable and had annoyed me to no end. So that day, I decided that I was finally going to talk to Frank and tell him to put an end to this. I could have said something for myself, but all my life I've been told that I have a tendency to take things too far, and even as a child, sometimes I would say hurtful things during fights and stuff. So I didn't want to say anything that would ruin Frank's relationship with his mother because then that would also ruin his relationship with his father, and I didn't want to be held responsible for that. And that is why, so far, I had kept my cool and not dignified any of their jibes at me with a response. But after that day, I had had enough and somebody needed to put an end to this. I had expected Frank to stand up for me and say something, but when he hadn't done it on his own, I thought that I could just nudge him in the right direction, and he would tell his mother to lay off. But when I sat him down to talk to him about this, he didn't even try to entertain the discussion and said that he was not interested in getting caught up in family drama. To be completely fair, I didn't think this was just family drama or even drama at all because this was actually getting on my nerves now, and they were insulting me. So as my husband, he should have at least tried to intervene, and I shouldn't have even had to talk to him about this. But he brought up a bunch of things and said that he had believed that I was an independent woman and I was capable of fighting my own battles, which is why he had nothing to say. He told me that if I wanted somebody to defend me, then I would just have to do it myself. I thought that was really condescending, and I remember telling him that day that I didn't have a problem with defending myself and standing up to them, but then it could quite possibly ruin his relationship with his mother, and then he would never get to see his dad again. So he said that I could just choose not to attend these family gatherings, but even that was not an option because I didn't want to come off as a coward. And when I said that the next time Sandra and Karen picked on me and made unwelcome remarks about me, I would just hit back at them, but as an afterthought, Frank told me not to do that, probably because he didn't like the sound of me taking things too far, and he was scared that he wouldn't be allowed to see his dad again if I offended his mother at an extreme level. However, he also stuck to the fact that this was just a family drama and he didn't want to get involved in this. But I had been putting up with Karen and Sandra's behavior for months and had stayed quiet for so long that I was not willing to do it anymore. After a lot of arguing and shouting, we came to the conclusion that I could just sit out the next couple of family gatherings. He would cover for me and make some excuses, like maybe I was too busy to show up. Of course, that would only fuel their hatred against me and give them something more to talk about, but that was a risk that I was willing to take. So after the discussion, we decided on a common conclusion that worked for both of us, and we went through with it. For the past couple of months, I have not attended a single family event, and it's been pretty great. Frank and I never really had any problems as such, apart from the equation with his mother, and since I was not attending any events or gatherings, we had pretty much forgotten about all of it. But then recently, he came back home a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that his parents were celebrating their 35th marriage anniversary, and they had specifically asked for me to be present because if I didn't show up at such an important event, then it would reflect poorly on the family. Apparently, Karen was even ready to speak to me in person if that's what it took to make me attend. I was a little surprised that they wanted me there, but I decided to go anyway because I thought that if they were trying to make things right with me, then I would be willing to give them a chance. And the fact that Karen had specifically requested for me to attend seemed like a nice gesture because I'm the kind of person who likes to see the good in everybody, and it didn't set off any alarms for me. So I told Frank that I would attend the party with him, and when Frank confirmed it, Karen even reached out to me personally via text and thanked me for agreeing to attend. I thought that it was really sweet, and I believed that things were finally going to change for the better now. Of course, they didn't. I was a fool to ever even think that. A few days ago, I attended the anniversary party with Frank, and a lot of people had been invited. All of Frank's family was there, and even some of his friends were present. Quite unsurprisingly, even Sandra was present. Karen and Sandra were exceptionally nice to me and welcomed me to the party quite happily. For a while, everything was going well, and Frank and I were socializing. We were there for about an hour, and at one point I think Frank and I were speaking to one of his aunts. Out of nowhere, Karen and Sandra came around and joined the conversation, and I didn't have a problem with it. But then, for no reason, Karen started talking about how she wished that everybody could have a story like she and her husband did. She mentioned that the two of them were childhood sweethearts and grew up as neighbors. They got married as soon as they were old enough legally, and even though this was only the 35th marriage anniversary, in her head, she had been married to her husband for way longer. I thought that was a great story until she started talking about how she had wished the same thing for her son as well and had almost thought that it would happen when he married Sandra. I was really taken aback by that statement because I absolutely did not see that coming. One minute she was talking about her own life and her story with her husband, and out of nowhere, she hit us with that. I realized in that moment that all of this had been an act and her real intention had been to humiliate me because when she had started narrating the story of how she and her husband had met, everybody had left the conversation and was paying attention to it because everyone else, just like me, had assumed that this was going to be a sweet little anecdote on their wedding anniversary. But of course not. She had to make it about her favorite girl, Sandra, somehow. She didn't even look at me when she was talking about how much she wished that Frank had stuck it out with Sandra instead of just leaving and getting a divorce when they hit a snag. Sandra took up the opportunity to say that she was still willing to work things out with him. She knew that I was just a rebound, and he was actually still in love with her. He looked just as blindsided as I felt, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I started screaming at them and told them to back off because they were literally insane, and there was no way that I was going to take this. I called them all a bunch of spineless cowards and said that I was done putting up with their, frankly, psychotic behavior. I called my mother-in-law crazy and said that she needed to get herself checked because it was very obvious that she had deep-seated mental issues, and she needed to be committed to an institution because, in my opinion, she was beyond help. And if she really loved Sandra so much, she should have just adopted her. As for Sandra, I told her that she was literally the most pathetic and vile creature I had ever had the misfortune of coming across in my life. And I guess I should have just left it at that, but I also just had to say something to my father-in-law. I told him that I respected him and I really appreciated the fact that he didn't treat me the way his wife did, but he should think about the kind of person he has been married to, because even though she takes care of him, she's pretty much a monster otherwise. And then I stormed out of the party without Frank. I was so annoyed that I didn't even want to look back and check if he was following. I honestly didn't care if he was coming with me or not, because at that moment I only cared about myself and getting the heck out of there. Shockingly enough, he didn't come back home with me, and I had to take a cab by myself. He only came back about half an hour after I was home, and when I confronted him about what the heck he was up to for so long, he snapped at me and told me that he was cleaning up the mess that I had made. He told me that he had to apologize not only to his parents but to all the guests that were present there because of my outburst. He said that I had taken things way too far and that I owed everybody a huge apology as well. He told me that the way that I had behaved at the party was simply unacceptable, and the things that I had said were straight up insane. Apparently, he believed that I should have saved it for another day instead of ruining their anniversary party and having a breakdown in front of so many guests. So we got into a massive fight because I thought that it was really unfair of him to pin the blame on me when this whole mess would have been avoided if he just had the courage to confront his mother and tell her to shut up. Instead, he had allowed Karen and Sandra to gang up on me and bully me for the past 3 years, and all that was just because he didn't want to get involved in family drama. Even if my honor was at stake, I thought that it was ridiculous of him and, quite frankly, very selfish. So I told him that he was being a horrible husband right now, and that's how the fight escalated. We haven't been speaking to each other for the past couple of days, and it's been awful. I don't feel like I need to apologize, but I do feel bad about this whole situation because, apart from the weird situation with his parents, Frank and I have always gotten along really well, and I do love him, and I know for a fact that he loves me as well. But he just has a hard time speaking up against his family because of his father. I really want to fix this, but I don't think that I need to apologize for the things that I said. Yes, I might have taken it way too far, but I think that this was long overdue. The way that Karen and Sandra had been trying to mentally harass me for the past few years just got to me, and I couldn't control my emotions anymore, and I don't see anything wrong with it because I think I was way more patient than most other people would have been in my place. Nonetheless, I want to make sure that I'm in the right here. So, AITA for insulting my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and my husband's ex-wife in front of his entire family at their anniversary party? Date 1. Okay, so I know a lot of you might not be happy about this, but I don't care. I just wanted to make my marriage work, so instead of bottling my feelings up, I decided to talk to Frank because I didn't want to break up. I didn't apologize to him, but last evening after we came back home from work, I said that I wanted to talk to him, and to my surprise, he didn't even reply to it before he walked over to me and gave me a hug that lasted for almost 5 minutes. He told me that he had missed me, and before I even had the opportunity to say anything, he said that he was sorry for the way that he behaved. He said that he had been an idiot and that he was just embarrassed that day, which is why he had reacted like a fool instead of comforting me and trying to show me that he was on my side. He told me that after our fight, he had been sleeping on the couch, and he had called Karen one night and told her off. He told me that he had decided to cut ties with his family, including his father, because on the day that I had my outburst at their house, his father had taken Karen's side. So he told me that he was done with all of them, and this is it. It's just us now. I'm actually really happy and relieved because I thought that I would have to have a difficult discussion with him, but he made it so much easier for me to deal with everything. I'm truly grateful that I have such a good man as my husband, but nevertheless, we're still going to go for marriage counseling because we don't want to bottle things up and have them come out in unhealthy ways like this anymore. So thank you for all the advice and everything. I'm thankful for all of it, and I'm even more grateful that my husband and I are going to fix this. Update 2. Hi, so I just thought that I would let you guys know that marriage counseling has been going well. It's been a couple of months, and we have had absolutely no contact with his family. It was a little rough for him in the beginning, but he had to come to terms with the fact that they were all toxic, and every day we're getting better. Update 3. It's been a long time, but I'm back with great news. And Frank and I are really happy to inform everyone that I'm pregnant. It's been a few weeks, and it still feels surreal. We haven't announced it to anybody yet, and we are trying to keep it under wraps because I know for a fact that Frank's family will be hounding us to reestablish contact once again if we announce this, and we want some time away from the drama before the inevitable confrontation. But right now, it's just me, Frank, and the baby, and I have never been happier in my entire life. I'm glad that I chose to work things out. It might not be the best way for everyone else, but for me, it really worked. Karen and Sandra really screwed themselves out of this one because Frank is pretty much the best person I have ever met, and I really can't imagine spending my life with anyone else. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.